Chapter 660. What the F*** CK? Zhang Hai shouted in surprise as he grabbed the upper left handle. To be honest, even in winter, the desert was not a fun place. The wind would blow sand all over one's face, and the temperature was particularly hot. Therefore, as soon as they entered the desert, they closed the windows. It was somewhat suffocating, but fortunately, there was air conditioning and ventilation, which was not bad. But another point was that there was no road in the desert. If they wanted to walk, they had to pass through the sand dunes. To be honest, it was too much of a scam. The degree of shaking was actually no less than riding a roller coaster, and the most important thing was that this thing did not give them any sense of security. Zhang Hai had just crashed into a tree a few days ago, and now he felt that the car would flip over at any time. It was really too much of a scam. Don't worry, there's no need to make a fuss. This is actually just an appetizer. Hearing Zhang Hai's shouting, Du Feimin couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, compared to Zhang Hai's terrain, he was already used to it and sat very steadily. After driving for about half an hour, the car slowly stopped. As soon as the car stopped, Zhang Hai directly pushed open the door and walked out. He lay on the ground and panted heavily. The road here was too much of a scam. Was this a joke? How could it be so fierce? Looking at Zhang Hai lying on the ground, Du Feimin also walked out and said with a smile, "Hey, you're really strange. I thought I wouldn't be able to stand on the ground alive, but where is your ranch? Why can't I see it?" After lying on the ground for about 2 minutes, Zhang Hai recovered, but after standing up and looking around, he found that he was still surrounded by a desert. Is Du Feimin playing with me? What the hell is this? Where's the ranch? The ranch is in the middle of the desert. In fact, to be honest, we are still at the edge of the desert. There are still 2 hours of driving. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai's face turned dark. 2 hours? Why did you stop the car now? Although his face was particularly dark, Zhang Hai still had to ask. What kind of method was this? We're stopping now to let the air out of the tires. Actually, we haven't entered the desert yet. We still have to walk on the road ahead. It's much more interesting than the front. If the air in the tires is too full, it will be difficult to maintain balance. You have to let some air out to make the tires softer so that it's easier to move forward. Hearing Zhang Hai's doubts, Du Feimin also shared some knowledge with him. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai's face dripped with cold sweat. He had no other thoughts. Are you kidding me? This is just an appetizer? The real main course was yet to come. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai swore in his heart that he would not come here if he had nothing to do. Well, even if he had something to do, he would not come here. The city of Dubai was quite fun, but this place was too deceptive. Why didn't you come here by helicopter? Looking at Zhang Hai's ashen face, Azalina, who was not affected, could not help but walk over and pat his back. She knew that her boss was frightened by this statement. Then she looked at Du Feimin and said doubtfully, "It's not that I don't want to, but it's because in the desert, it's just like in the sea. There might be a storm at any time, and helicopters can't fly high. If we're unlucky and encounter a storm, then we're dead. There's no airport on the ranch, so there's no way to land, so we can only drive here." Hearing Azalina's words, Du Feimin spread his hands and explained to Zhang Hai. However, Zhang Hai did not know how much of this was true. But since they were already here, Zhang Hai could not go back directly. So, after resting for a while, he got on the car again and experienced the feeling of this box-type roller coaster. Fortunately, this driver was indeed the best driver. Although the journey was very thrilling, and some slopes were even more than 70 degrees, the car did not stop. But the car didn't overturn, and it drove very steadily. Following the car, Zhang Hai and the others jumped over sand mountains and seas. About 2 hours later, when the car stopped again, Zhang Hai climbed out of the car. Now he didn't vomit, which was quite difficult. After retching for a long time, Zhang Hai did not care about how hot the sand on the ground was. He directly lay on the ground and did not want to get up again. Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, Du Feimin sat in the car, amused. He knew that Zhang Hai would not be able to recover for a while, so he would not get out of the car and be exposed to the sun now. After about 10 minutes, Zhang Hai slowly got up from the ground. Seeing Zhang Hai get up, Du Feimin also got out of the car and took the initiative to walk in front of Zhang Hai. He patted his back and brushed off the sand on it. I won't come again in the future. No matter what you say, I won't come again. Zhang Hai waved his hand and looked at Du Feimin firmly. You're too weak. Actually, you'll get used to it after a while. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin smiled and said to him. After the two chatted for a while, Zhang Hai also looked into the distance. This time, he saw a ranch in the distance. Looking at this ranch, even Zhang Hai had to admit that the Dubai royal family was indeed rich. At this time, in Zhang Hai's eyes, their ranch should be a giant oasis, covering an area of about hundreds of thousands of acres. Outside the green U, there was a layer of electrified wall. This was the same as Zhang Hai's manor. Behind the wall, there were several rows of huge trees used to block the wind and sand. Inside the trees, there was a green grassland. Wow, you're really generous. Looking at the endless ranch in front of him, Zhang Hai was honestly shocked. Worthy of the legendary Dubai royal family, they were indeed more generous than Zhang Hai. This place was originally a small oasis, with a very rich underground water source. Since I came back from your place, I used the power of the whole country to expand this oasis. The trees outside are the most effective in blocking the wind and sand. The outermost layer is a palm tree, below it is a date palm tree, and the inner layer is a date palm tree. The fruit of this kind of tree tastes pretty good. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin also introduced the oasis. The land we're stepping on is all flown in from the most fertile Australia. It's covered with the sea mud of the Persian Gulf, and the grass planted on it is emperor bamboo grass. I can say that everything is prepared according to the best pasture, but the most important thing is still your grass. Looking at Zhang Hai, Du Feimin said while walking. It was obvious that he really valued this project. Zhang Hai also glanced at the so-called emperor bamboo grass. There was no emperor bamboo grass in Zhang Hai's manor, but it did not prevent him from hearing about this grass. Emperor bamboo grass, known as the royal family of the pasture, was the strongest pasture. It was a cross between elephant grass and North American wolf's tail grass. In the ranch, this grass was recognized as the best pasture in the world. It grew quickly, was rich in nutrients, and had good effects. However, Zhang Hai's manor did not have it, because this grass was not suitable for Winthrop. The living habits of this kind of pasture were more deceptive. It was only suitable for tropical and subtropical planting. The sun required more than 1,000 hours of sunshine per year. The altitude range was okay, and it could be planted at 2001500 meters. The annual average temperature was above 15 degrees, and the precipitation was above 1,000 millimeters. However, this could be done by watering. The annual frost-free period was about 250 days. This alone was impossible for Zhang Hai's manor. The soil had to be very fertile, but it also had to be very fertile sandy soil. If all the above requirements were met, about 25 stalks could be distributed in a year. In fact, to be honest, many families had made a fortune by raising this grass. For example, Du Feimin's ranch was basically planted with this grass. It had to be admitted that this was the style of a nouveau riche. Of course, it was impossible to only plant one type of grass in a ranch, just like how people could not only eat one type of vegetable. This type of grass was the main pasture. In addition, there were many other types of pasture, such as rye grass, sweet elephant grass, corn grass, alfalfa grass, and so on. In terms of grass alone, the pasture in Du Feimin's ranch was probably much better than the pasture in Zhang Hai's manor. Of course, this referred to the time before Zhang Hai's arrival. Now, the pasture in Zhang Hai's manor can be regarded as the best in the world. Seeing that Zhang Hai was very satisfied with his ranch, Du Feimin could not help but laugh. Come, look at the cattle I prepared. They were not short of money. He also understood the principle that high investment equaled high income. As long as they could make money, they did not mind investing more. After looking at the ranch, grass and trees, Zhang Hai followed Du Feimin to look at their cattle. However, after looking at them, Zhang Hai could not help but secretly scold him for being a prodigal. Zhang Hai was very confident in his pasture. In his opinion, the cattle that Du Feimin bought were Angus cattle and the like. Just these cattle alone, Zhang Hai was confident that he could use his pasture to raise about 5% of 5A grade beef. However, Du Feimin obviously did not think so. Therefore the cattle he bought were really not ordinary cattle. Basically, Zhang Hai looked around. Most of the cattle here were Zymenthal and Charolais. According to the standard, these two cattle breeds were better than Angus cattle. Their crossbreeds were already considered the top cattle breeds in the country. In the country, the best cattle in the country were Lucy cattle. However, whether it was Charolais cattle or Zymenthal cattle, their crossbreeds in the country were 1.5 times more profitable than Lucy cattle in the country. Moreover, the cattle that Du Feynman bought were all purebred. Whether it was in terms of meat production, meat output or quality, they were all better than Angus cattle, let alone domestic cattle. In addition to these cattle, Du Feynman also raised a batch of Japanese cattle. In addition, there were many camels and sheep here. It was obvious that Du Feynman really cared about this place. Looking at these animals in front of him, Zhang Hai could not help but nod to himself. He was no longer the Xiao Bai from a year ago. Now he had his own opinions. Du Feynman's place was not his territory. Because he was the royal family of Dubai, occupying an oasis might not cost him much money. However, the cost of these cattle and sheep alone was probably not lower than the total price of his own manor. In other words, just buying these cattle and sheep alone might cost him more than $300 million. This was really not an ordinary amount of money. As he followed Du Feynman, he looked around and observed the situation of the ranch. To be honest, Zhang Hai did not have much to say, because the layout of this ranch was much better than his own manor. Whether it was the supporting facilities, the density of the guards, the quality of the grass, and so on, Zhang Hai could not even say a word. Compared to this ranch, Zhang Hai's ranch was much more unprofessional. After all, Zhang Hai himself came from an unorthodox background. Robbins Garcia and the others were not well-bred cowboys, so they did not know much about these things, let alone teach Zhang Hai. Therefore, after walking around here, Zhang Hai did not have much to say. Your place is very good. I don't have any opinions. When are you going to come to my place to gather grass? After looking around and confirming that there was no room for him to say anything, Zhang Hai said to Du Feynman, because he really did not know what to say. As soon as possible. When is it convenient for you? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman smiled. In fact, he invited Zhang Hai here mainly to let Zhang Hai see if his ranch and Zhang Hai's grass were compatible. If there was any conflict, it would be troublesome. In fact, he was thinking too much. Zhang Hai's grass was compatible with everything. If a person ate it, there would only be benefits, not to mention cows. Then let's do it at the beginning of March. At that time, the snow in Winthrop will melt, and it will be easier to gather grass. After I come to your place, I will have to go back to Huaxia. It may take more than a month before I go back. At the beginning of March, I will be back. At that time, you can come to gather grass. He calculated the time in his heart. The beginning of March was a good time. At that time, the grass in his manor that was tied up but not eaten by the cows could be sold to Du Feynman. At that time, he should also start fishing. Thinking about it, it was only during this period that he was relatively free. After he started fishing in the beginning of spring, he might be busy for a period of time again. I see. No problem. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman thought for a moment. This was acceptable. It would only take more than a month. He could try it himself. Without Zhang Hai's grass, he could raise cows very well. Your Highness Du Feynman. Just as Zhang Hai and Du Feynman were about to settle this matter, a voice suddenly came from afar. Hearing this voice, Zhang Hai and Du Feynman both looked over. They only saw that at this time in the distance, a yellow man was being stopped by Du Feynman's bodyguard, and he was constantly shouting towards Du Feynman. Seeing this person, Du Feynman's face smiled, then he waved to the bodyguard. The bodyguard saw that his master had spoken, so he let go of his hand, allowing the yellow man to quickly run over. Chapter 661. Your Highness. After the middle-aged man ran over, he glanced at Zhang Hai in front of him, but he did not greet him. Instead, Zhang Hai felt a trace of hostility from him, which made Zhang Hai somewhat puzzled. It seemed that he did not know this yellow-skinned man. After the yellow-skinned man glanced at Zhang Hai, he respectfully looked at Du Feynman, and said with a serious face while stroking his chest, "Oh, Mr. Akita, may I know why you are looking for me?" Looking at the yellow-skinned man in front of him, Du Feynman said with a smile. Hearing him call this person's name, Zhang Hai also knew that this guy should be a Japanese. No wonder Zhang Hai felt a little unhappy when he saw him. But now that he was in Du Feimin's territory, Zhang Hai could not say much. After all, Du Feimin was different from him. He was the royal family of Dubai. Although he had some personal relations with him, it was impossible for him to overlook public affairs for personal reasons. Your Highness is too polite. Just call me Akita. I came here because I heard that His Highness Du Feimin invited a guest, so I came to have a look and discuss the situation of cattle raising. The guy called Akita said while looking at Zhang Hai. From his eyes, it was not difficult for Zhang Hai to see that he was still very hostile to him, and the source of this hostility might be this ranch. I'm Akita Mango, the director of the Foreign Trade Bureau of Japan's Akita Corporation. I'm also one of the designers and builders of this ranch. I heard that Mr. Jiang is a kindred spirit, so I'd like to come and ask for advice. After saying that, Akita did not care about Du Feimin's ugly face and looked at Zhang Hai with a serious face. At the same time, he bowed to Zhang Hai, which was also the etiquette of Japan. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai touched his nose. This guy must be crazy. Forget about asking for advice, because I don't know anything about ranching. I don't know anything about farming, from management to breeding. Well, maybe Zhang Hai didn't have any specialization. Other than spiritual energy, he didn't have any other specialties. Therefore, instead of being ridiculed for a while, it was better to tell the truth first. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, not only was Akita Makoto stunned for a moment, but even Du Feimin was stunned for a moment. Although Akita Makoto seemed to be brainless, his IQ was not low. Although Akita Corporation was not as powerful as Yasui or Mitsubishi in Japan, Akita Corporation was not as flashy in Japan. But in fact, this conglomerate was quite a capital group. They were Japan's #1 livestock export company. Otherwise, they would not be able to get in touch with Du Feimin. Japan's livestock industry was very famous around the world. In the beginning, Japan's animal husbandry wasn't very famous. After all, Japan's territory was only so small. Other than the places where people lived, the food grown on the island was really only enough to prevent the people from starving to death. Later, Japan changed its policy. They no longer grew a large amount of food, vegetables, and fruits in Japan. They changed to high-end sales. They only raised the best cattle and planted the best rice. They used the price difference to gain a foothold in the international farmers' market. As for the food that ordinary people ate, it was all imported from Huaxia. This was because imported from Huaxia was much cheaper than in their own country. In fact, not only Japan, but South Korea was also the same. At this time, most of the vegetables and fruits in Japan and South Korea were imported from Huaxia's Lu province. Of course, their domestic requirements were very high. They couldn't be too big, too small, or ugly. Therefore, the price was much more expensive than those sold in China. Many people specialized in this business. Akita Corporation was one of the leaders in Japan's livestock industry. Akita Makoto could be considered as the family head of Akita Corporation. However, it was not a very important family head. Although his surname was Akita, he did not have shares or inheritance rights. This time, he was the one who proposed to be on good terms with Du Feimin. Even those Wagyu cattle were brought over by him. He already knew about the relationship between Du Feimin and Zhang Hai. But he believed that he would definitely be more favored by Du Feimin than Zhang Hai, this lucky upstart. After all, he was a professional. In his opinion, Zhang Hai was just a lucky upstart, nothing more. He didn't know what kind of black technology he used, or what kind of shameless technology. Zhang Hai's cattle were sold at a high price, and even beat a Japanese animal husbandry company. But Akita was not the same as the company he defeated. They were the best company in Japan. Whether it was the company or the individual, he did not think that he would lose to Zhang Hai. So don't look at how he came here so rashly. In fact, he had thought it through carefully. He wanted to defeat Zhang Hai at his proudest moment, expose the fact that he was a liar, and then make friends with Du Feimin. This way, not only would his company benefit, but his country would also benefit. He could even become a hero. When he thought of this, his eyes couldn't help but turn red. But what he didn't expect was that Zhang Hai would actually admit it. He wanted to compete with Zhang Hai to prove that Zhang Hai was a liar. But now, Zhang Hai directly said that he didn't know anything about business or farming. He was a liar, a dignified liar. This really made him speechless. You cough. You don't know anything about farming. What are you doing here? Seeing that Zhang Hai didn't play by the rules, Akita Masao almost couldn't breathe. He coughed, looked at Zhang Hai, and said with a serious face, I'm here to play. Du Feimin is my friend. But after listening to his words, Zhang Hai looked at him with even more confusion. It was as if he was looking at a fool. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Akita Masao really didn't know what to say. He felt that his face was burning hot because he didn't know what to say. This was like a master inviting his friend to play in the house, but the servant in the house had to drag the guest to compete with him to see who could wipe the table clean. Thinking of this, Akita Masao couldn't help but open his mouth, then looked at Du Feimin. Mr. Akita, if there's nothing else, you can go and rest. My friend and I still have to look around. Du Feimin couldn't help but chuckle as he looked at his blindfolded eyes. This guy is trying to embarrass me, right? So arrogant. I'm really sorry, I was rude. Hearing Du Feimin's words, Akita Masao was completely confused. Although Du Feimin didn't say anything too harsh, he could hear that this guy was a little unhappy, so he immediately bent down and bowed to Du Feimin and Zhang Hai, then quickly left. He had to go back and think about what was going on with Zhang Hai. Seeing Akita Masao leave, Zhang Hai looked at Du Feimin and said somewhat speechlessly, Your manor was built by the Japanese? I know that you Huaxia people don't like the Japanese, so I originally wanted to find an American company or an Australian company to build this ranch. You know, although Huaxia's company is cheap, they don't have much experience in this area, but my cousin found them. He is the chief, so he can do whatever he wants. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin shrugged. He thought that Zhang Hai was angry. However, when Zhang Hai heard his words, he shook his head. He didn't mind these things because he knew that there was no top-notch ranch in the country. In China, most people didn't know that beef still had to be graded. Beef still had to be divided into portions. The difference between lean meat, eye meat, and cucumber strips was really not known by many people. In China, it was still stuck at the time of how much a cow was worth, and it wasn't divided according to grade. Therefore, it was inevitable that Du Feimin didn't look for Chinese people to build it. If it was Zhang Hai, he also wouldn't look for Chinese people to build it. In this aspect, the Japanese did have an advantage. Whether you admit it or not, the Japanese cattle was the best breed in the world. This was undeniable. The top breed in the country was the Lucy yellow cattle, but in the world, this breed was only at the bottom of the second class. It was indeed not a good breed, and in addition to the Japanese, there were many other countries that the Chinese hated. Britain, France, the United States, Germany, Russia, Japan, Italy, Austria, Prussia, and the Netherlands all invaded Huaxia, and the Huaxia people didn't like them. In addition, in recent years, the South Asian countries, South Korea, and India, these countries, Huaxia didn't like any of them. It can be said that according to the world map, except for North Korea and some West Asian countries, Huaxia was the enemy of the whole world. If Zhang Hai was really like an angry youth, why would he go to the United States? He would have done construction for the sake of social justice. Okay, I don't care about these things. We are friends, and I don't have shares in your ranch. How much do you want for the first batch of fodder? I'll call them back and let them prepare earlier. Waving his hand, Zhang Hai really didn't care about these small things. Looking at Du Feimin, he said to him. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin thought for a moment. He couldn't bet all his treasures on Zhang Hai. Now, in this ranch, according to his initial request, there were a total of 1.2 million cattle, including 500,000 Charolais cattle, 500,000 Simmental cattle, 150,000 Japanese cattle, 30,000 dairy cows, and 20,000 other mixed cattle, 800,000 sheep, 50,000 alpacas, and some other things. If these guys all ate Zhang Hai's fodder, Zhang Hai might not be able to supply them. After all, it was still winter. Moreover, Du Feimin didn't want to use all of them, so in the end, he decided to pick out 50,000 cattle to eat the fodder that Zhang Hai sent over. 50,000 cattle. Zhang Hai could also bear it. He could also do an experiment first. It was quite convenient. Zhang Hai was a very casual person. Sometimes, business deals were settled just like that. After discussing the quantity of the first batch of fodder, Zhang Hai and the others continued to stroll around. They had to admit that strolling around the grassland in the desert was indeed a very enjoyable thing. After strolling around for a while, they returned to the residential area. There, Du Feynman specially held a party to welcome Zhang Hai. At the party, Zhang Hai saw Akita Masaaki for the second time, but this guy's hostility was deeper. In his opinion, Zhang Hai was an out-and-out bastard. On one hand, Zhang Hai told him that he didn't know how to manage or raise livestock, but on the other hand, he sold so much fodder to Du Feynman. It was the first time he knew that fodder was so valuable. Zhang Hai's fodder was about to be sold for the price of an ordinary cow. In his opinion, Zhang Hai was a liar who was fooling him. It was really too hateful, but there was no other way. Du Feynman trusted this liar, and he didn't know why it was like this. If he knew that Du Feynman and Zhang Hai actually had a billion-dollar jewelry and antiques business, perhaps he wouldn't think so. How much were those things? How much were those things worth? Although money was just a number for the rich, who didn't want this number to be higher? It could be said that the cooperation between Zhang Hai and Du Feynman was only the smallest one. A billion-dollar business was already done. What was a billion-dollar business? At least, Du Feynman believed in Zhang Hai very much. Regarding Akita Masaaki's hostility, Zhang Hai felt helpless and a little amused. This guy really took him seriously. But it was still the same sentence. After all, this was Du Feynman's territory. Zhang Hai couldn't say anything. However, if this guy dared to bark, then Zhang Hai didn't mind letting him have a taste of being beaten. When a dog barked at you, you really couldn't call it back, but you could hit it back. As for the severity of the beating, it would depend on his mood. If the beating was light, he would treat it as a lesson. If the beating was heavy and killed, then he would treat it as if he deserved it. After making dog meat hot pot, it would taste pretty good. After cutting a piece of authentic Arabian barbecue meat in front of him, Zhang Hai put it into his mouth and laughed. It seemed that he hadn't eaten dog meat for a while. Naturally, Zhang Hai wasn't a dog lover. He had a dog, so he didn't feel guilty about eating dog meat. But in the United States, no one ate dog meat. Usually, when he went back, no one would go to Zhongluo to eat dog meat. Now, dog meat restaurants were rare. But after a while, when he returned to Bing City, he could go there to eat dog meat. Even gods couldn't stand still. Boss, what are you thinking about? Why are you so happy? Looking at Zhang Hai eating meat and smiling happily, Azalina, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but look at him strangely. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also reacted. Chapter 662. Oh, it's nothing. Azalina, have you eaten dog meat before? Zhang Hai smiled and shook his head, indicating that he was fine, and then said to Azalina. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina recalled her childhood. I ate it when I was young. At that time, we trained all day, but the nutritious meals we ate tasted terrible. Then I and a few of my sisters stole the dog that the instructor often let out to bite us. We roasted it and ate it. To be honest, the taste was not very good. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina couldn't help but be immersed in her memories. She did not tell Zhang Hai about how hard it was when she was young. However, Zhang Hai has seen some special agent movies and the like. It's not an exaggeration to say that the training is **********. Soviet Russia has this tradition since a long time ago. This fighting nation is ruthless to the enemy and even more ruthless to themselves. So needless to say, Zhang Hai also knows what she went through when she was young. But at this time, he can't say anything to comfort her because it will make him seem hypocritical. Zhang Hai is not a hypocritical person, so although his heart skipped a beat, there is no other expression on his face. That's because you didn't eat good food. When we return to Bing City, I will take you to eat good food. Patting Azalina's shoulder, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina also laughed. But at this time, Zhang Hai's phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone and looked at it. It was an unfamiliar number. It can be said that it was the first time he saw it. This made Zhang Hai feel a little strange, but this ringtone lasted for a long time, which made Zhang Hai a little confused. After thinking for a while, he picked it up. What if it was someone he knew using someone else's phone? Hello? Hello. After picking up the phone, Zhang Hai said to the other side of the phone. Hello, brother. Where are you? After picking up the phone, a woman's voice came from the other side of the phone, but her way of calling made Zhang Hai confused. Brother? When did I have a younger sister? And this voice sounds a little unfamiliar. Did you call the wrong number? After thinking for a while, Zhang Hai decided to explain. Aren't you Zhang Hai? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the woman on the other side of the phone said with some doubts. Hearing this woman call his name, Zhang Hai can't help but be a little dumbfounded. He didn't recognize who this person is. Yes, you are. Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts. It's me, you. Hearing that Zhang Hai really couldn't recognize who she was, the female voice on the other side of the phone couldn't help but speak with some exasperation. You. Hearing these two words, Zhang Hai was a little confused for a while, and a trace of memory was recalled. Zhang Hai's mother's surname is He. When his mother was still alive, he also had a group of relatives, but after his mother passed away, Zhang Hai didn't have any contact with these relatives, and these relatives naturally didn't want to have any contact with him. Zhang Hai has 3 uncles and 1 aunt. This family has 5 daughters in total. It may be the old tradition of the Northeast that values boys over girls, but Zhang Hai is a nephew, so since he was a child, his uncles and aunts were not very good to Zhang Hai. When they grew up, they didn't have any contact. This He-Yu is the youngest daughter of Zhang Hai's uncle. She also has an elder sister, who is the same age as Zhang Hai and a few months older. Her name is He-Feng. The second uncle's daughter is He-Ru-A, the youngest uncle's daughter is He-Yu, and the eldest aunt's daughter is Wen-Jing. But this family, to be honest, is a bit snobbish. They originally didn't like Zhang Hai, not to mention after Zhang Hai's mother died, they disliked Zhang Hai even more. Of course, you can't expect others to be good to you. So Zhang Hai never complained about them. If they didn't want to be relatives, then they would be strangers. So no matter when Zhang Hai was good or bad, he never went to these relatives' houses. He just treated them as if they didn't exist. And they seemed to want this, but now they suddenly called Zhang Hai, which made Zhang Hai a little surprised. Oh, what's the matter? Although Zhang Hai doesn't want to acknowledge these relatives, he still has to ask, so he said to He-Yu. It's like this. On the 27th of next month, it's my dad's 60th birthday party. Remember to come early. Hearing that Zhang Hai remembered her, He-Yu obviously didn't want to talk to this cousin who doesn't remember her anymore. She directly said to Zhang Hai, "Oh, I might not have time. I'm not in Bing City now." Hearing what He-Yu said, Zhang Hai told the truth. He really doesn't want to go. Not in Bing City? Where did you go? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, He-Yu was also stunned for a moment and asked curiously. I'm mainly in the United States now, but now I'm in Dubai. There is nothing to hide, so Zhang Hai said directly. Hey brother, I used to know that you were poor, but I didn't expect you to learn how to lie. The United States? Dubai. Haha, it's so funny. But after hearing the truth from Zhang Hai, He-Yu on the other side was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Hearing He-Yu's words and laughter, Zhang Hai froze for a moment. Then the fire in his heart suddenly flared up, but it was extinguished in an instant. It was useless to talk to these people. It was indeed meaningless. Therefore he just smiled. Brother, if you don't want to come, just say it. We won't laugh at you for not having enough money to give a red packet. You don't have to find such a reason. Maybe she had enough of laughing. He-Yu on the other side said to Zhang Hai. The strong disdain in her words kept refreshing Zhang Hai's lowest point. Well, actually you are right. I just don't want to go. Tell uncle and wish him a happy birthday. Okay, I still have something to do here, so I'll hang up first. Shaking his head, Zhang Hai ignored the mocking laughter on the phone, said directly, and hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Hai quickly adjusted his mood and continued to eat. At this time, in Bing City, in a warm room, a family was talking and laughing. They looked at He-Yu, who walked in with a gloomy face. How is it? Where is Xiao Hai? If he is at home, let him come over and drink now. An old man sitting in the middle said. Well, it's not easy to define age now. 60 years old, you can say that you are an old man. You can also say that you are a middle-aged man. Here you can say that you are an old man. This man is Zhang Hai's uncle, He Weihua. Looking at his daughter who came in, He Weihua's face was full of smiles as he said. Sai, that eldest nephew of yours has no intention of coming here for a meal. He is doing well now. He is in the US and Dubai. Hearing her father's words, He said with a sour face. Hearing what she said, the atmosphere in the room can't help but become a little awkward. Where did he go? Abroad? Hearing what his daughter said, Xueqi asked with some doubts. Yes, he said that he doesn't live in Bing City now. He lives in the United States and is now in Dubai. I haven't seen your nephew for 3 years, and he has learned nothing but bragging. We don't know his family's situation. What's the point of bragging to us? Looking at Xueqi in front of her, He sat down and said with a sour face. In her opinion, Zhang Hai was bragging. Okay, don't be angry. No matter what he said is true or not, when we get married, let's go to these 2 places. Do you want to go to Dubai or the United States? Looking at Yu's expression, a man sitting next to her couldn't help but laugh and say. This man looked to be in his 30s. His clothes were not bad, but he exuded a wretched aura. This man is called Xiangming. He is Yu's boyfriend, but he is not a good person. Yu did not go to university. She was a kindergarten teacher in high school. After graduation, her family used their connections to get her into a kindergarten. She is 6 years younger than Zhang Hai, 22 years old this year. Xiangming is the parent of her student. He is 34 years old this year, older than her. He is a businessman and has some money. Then he hooked up with Yu. But Yu has to admit that Yu has some tricks up her sleeves. She took away Xiangming's original wife, and they divorced. Now Xiangming is devoted to Yu, although Yu's parents are not willing to do this. But children are like this, and they can't do anything about it. Fortunately, Xiangming is rich, and Zhang Hai's uncle's family is also very observant, so they turn a blind eye to it. As for Yu, she has an elder sister, Xia. Her husband is also a businessman. Xia is 8 years older than Yu. Although she has a lot of bad habits, at least she has never had a child before and has never been married. I want to go to these 2 places. Hearing Xiangming's words, Yu here said with a smile. Okay, whatever you want. Hearing Yu's words, Xiangming also responded with a smile. Facing this girlfriend of his who was younger than him, Xiangming treasured her a lot. However, in the eyes of others, this kind of behavior was somewhat unsuitable for them. Or, I will call Zhang Hai again. Look at my little sister, she didn't say anything on the phone just now. Looking at Yu and Xiangming in front of her, Xia hesitated and said to her father, Xueqi. Okay, you go and call another one. Looking at Yu and Xiangming, Xueqi sighed and said to Xia. Then Xia picked up her phone and went to the next room to call Zhang Hai. The phone was picked up not long after it rang. Hello? Who is it? At this time, Zhang Hai, who was in Dubai, was also drunk. He just wanted to have a good meal. Why were there so many unmarked phone calls today? Can't you let me have a good meal? The phone call just now made his mood bad. He hoped that this one would be better. It's me, Xia. You just said that you went abroad? Hearing Zhang Hai's voice, Xia's voice also came from the other side of the phone. After hearing that it was Xia, Zhang Hai was a little silent. Because Xia and Zhang Hai were only a few months apart, it could be said that the 2 grew up together. Before Zhang Hai was 17 or 18 years old, which was 10 years ago, the relationship between the 2 was quite good. But since Xia graduated from high school and started to work, the 2 gradually lost contact. However, after all, they grew up together. She and Zhang Hai had a good relationship. When Zhang Hai's mother passed away, she didn't take any money. Of course, she didn't have much money, but she still helped a lot. In Zhang Hai's heart, there was still a trace of affection for this sister. At least when he needed help, she didn't pay, but she did put in effort. Oh, it's Sister Xia. Yes, I left last year. I went to Boston in the US. I opened a manor there and raised cows and fish. I have to find something for myself to do. Hearing Xia's voice, Zhang Hai's attitude became better. Oh, there? That's good. You are not young anymore. You should have something to do. It's still the same thing. My father's 60th birthday is on the 27th of next month. Will you be in Bing City or the US? I heard that you are in Dubai. When are you going to leave? Are you not coming back for the new year? Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Xia did not question Zhang Hai. Instead, she continued to talk to Zhang Hai. In fact, she believed a little now. But she only believed that Zhang Hai had gone to the US. As for what he was going to do there, it was another story. This was because it was not hard to find out about this. I am in Dubai now. I have a friend who opened a ranch here and raised some cows. I am here to help out and will not be staying for a few days. I should be going back during the new year. But to be honest, I don't really want to go. After the new year, I need to pick a date to move my parents' graves. I don't know if there will be any conflicts at that time. Listening to Xia's voice, Zhang Hai thought for a moment and told her about his arrangement. To be honest, he didn't want to go. This was actually quite an excuse, but Xia seemed to want Zhang Hai to come. Aunt is moving her parents' graves? Let me know when you have time. I will go and help. Aunt treated me well in the past. I cannot miss this opportunity. However, after hearing Zhang Hai's arrangement, Xia suddenly said. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai wanted to refuse, but he couldn't say it out loud. This matter was indeed better if there were more people and it was more lively. Thinking of his mother, who was really good to Xia in the past, he hesitated for a moment. Zhang Hai also agreed. But thinking about it, when his parents moved their graves, when her father celebrated his birthday, it seemed that he really couldn't avoid it. Thinking about it gave him a headache. To be honest, Zhang Hai did not want to interact with his relatives. But sometimes he had to interact with them. It was really troublesome. Chapter 663. What's wrong? Seeing Zhang Hai remain silent after hanging up the phone, Azalina looked at Zhang Hai and asked curiously. Scratching his head, Zhang Hai looked at Azalina, smiled helplessly, and said to her, Nothing, I just feel that it might be a little troublesome. Troublesome? Do you need me to deal with it? Hearing Zhang Hai say, Chibwa in English. Forget about the pronunciation. Anyway, Azalina understood. That was the most important thing. Hearing Zhang Hai say that there was trouble, she made a throat-slitting gesture. No, you're too cruel. I'm talking about my family. I thought I wouldn't have any interaction with them anymore, but I didn't expect there to be something else. Looking at her, Zhang Hai couldn't help but wave his hand immediately. What a joke. He was just going to attend a birthday banquet. He didn't need to kill anyone. Oh, I see. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina chose to shut her mouth. Since he didn't need her, it had nothing to do with her. Zhang Hai sat helplessly on the bench at this time. He really didn't know how to face his relatives. Speaking of which, Zhang Hai was not afraid of you being unreasonable, not afraid of you being tough, and not afraid of you flattering him with ulterior motives. If you were unreasonable to him, he would be even more unreasonable than you. If you were tough to him, he would be even tougher than you. If you flattered him, he wouldn't care. He was afraid that others would be nice to him. He was like this. Maybe it was because he lacked love in the past. If you gave him a drop of water, he would repay it with a gushing spring. For example, when you called at the beginning, Zhang Hai could completely tell her, I don't want to go, I'll hang up on you. But facing Xia, he really couldn't say that. Putting himself in Xia's shoes, he was a person who lacked love. I hope there won't be any complications this time. Rubbing his temples, Zhang Hai sighed and muttered in a low voice. While he was troubled by this matter, Akita Mako, who was opposite him, was staring at him. It was said that people of the same trade were enemies. This was not an exaggeration at all. Although Zhang Hai had never thought that he was in the same trade as Akita Shingo, his perspective was much higher than his. He did not mean to oppose this guy, but this guy did not think so. Originally, after Zhang Hai denied that he was in this line of work, his hostility towards Zhang Hai had decreased a lot. However, after he learned that Zhang Hai had sold another batch of grass to Du Feimin, in his eyes, this Zhang Hai was a shameful villain. He had 1,000,000% confidence in the Akita Corporation. If Zhang Hai came to compete openly, then they would have nothing to say. It was not shameful to lose. Perhaps the people of Japan were very shameless, but they could still afford to lose to Zhang Hai, a person from the United States. However, Zhang Hai's move was a little embarrassing. No, it was not just a little embarrassing, it was quite embarrassing. Akita-kun, this Zhang Hai is so shameless. Why don't we expose him and let His Highness Du Feynman put us in an even more important position? Seeing that Akita Shingo had been staring at Zhang Hai, another Japanese whispered beside him. No, Ino-kun, it's useless even if we go and talk about it. Because we don't know what he said to His Highness Du Feynman. His Highness Du Feynman trusts him very much. If we just talk about it without any evidence, it's very difficult to shake his position in His Highness Du Feynman's heart. Therefore we have to think of some other methods. Akita Jinwoo whispered as he glanced at Ino-kun beside him and drank his sake. All is fair in war. This person also taught you a lesson. This guy can make His Highness Du Feynman trust him so much with just his mouth. He should have learned Hua Xia's way of making alliances. I heard that he was also involved in the high-speed railway project that Hua Xia opened here last time. This young man should not be underestimated. At this time, an old Japanese man sitting in the back had a flash of light in his eyes, but it disappeared soon after. Then, he slowly spoke as if he didn't care at all. Hearing his words, Akita Shingo and Ino-kun, who were sitting in front, couldn't help but look at Zhang Hai. They just thought that this guy was a liar, but they didn't expect that this guy was not an ordinary liar. If Zhang Hai knew what they were thinking, he would probably be confused. They had to admit that sometimes, people were most concerned about being smart. They had made a total of 3 mistakes. First, Zhang Hai really wasn't playing any tricks, because he really didn't know how to manage and breed. He just directly used the best 5A grade beef as a stepping stone. Breeding was Robbins Garcia's business. When Zhang Hai was bored, he just put some spiritual energy in the water and watered the ground. That was all. Second, Zhang Hai didn't know how to make alliances. They were treating him as Su Qin and Zhang Yi. What a joke. Although Zhang Hai's current brain development was extremely high, to be honest, he didn't use it. For example, he used 2% of his brain in the past and developed 5%. Now it was 20%, but he still used the same 2%. At most it was 5%. That was all. Zhang Hai was a very lazy person, and the laziness he showed was that he was too lazy to think about things. That was how he got lazy. What alliances? It was all the way back to the pre-Qin era. Zhang Hai had to admit that these people thought too much. Maybe if they said more, Zhang Hai wouldn't understand. Third, they got the order wrong. It was because Zhang Hai provided pasture that Du Feynman raised cattle. It was not because Du Feynman raised cattle that Zhang Hai provided pasture. This was a matter of principle. If Zhang Hai didn't sell pasture, they might not even have a job. However, these people didn't know this because it was considered a trade secret. Then what should we do now? Retracting his gaze from Zhang Hai, Akita Jinwoo whispered to the old man behind him. This old man's name was Akita Masashi. Although on the surface, Akita Jinwoo was the leader of the team, but in fact, the one who had the final say was his uncle. One must know that this time, whether it was the Akita family or the Japanese government, both of them were very interested in this business. Japan was sparse and had a large population. Natural resources were extremely scarce. Originally, the production of silver was very high, but it had long been gone. Now, Japan's metal and other things were all given to them by their big brother, the United States. So this time, they came to the Middle East with the hope of getting some oil from the Middle East, but could they really get it? Wait, true gold is not afraid of fire. No matter how glib this person is, the quality of the pasture he provides will not change. As long as we check or prove that the pasture provided by Zhang Hai is just ordinary pasture, or if he added something else, then we can persuade Du Feynman. This is also the simplest way. Before that, there is no need to have any conflict with Zhang Hai. Picking up a piece of fish with chopsticks and putting it into his mouth, the old man said slowly while eating. Hearing the old man's words, Akita Jinwoo was relieved. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. If they had a conflict with Zhang Hai at this time, then Du Feynman was very likely to stand on Zhang Hai's side. Then they would be passive. Instead of this, it was better to not take action and wait and see. As long as Zhang Hai was a liar, there would be a day when he would show his tail. As long as that day came, they could seize the opportunity and beat Zhang Hai into the abyss. Yes. Hearing the old man's words, Akita Jinwoo and Ino both responded together. In their opinion, Zhang Hai was bound to lose. At this time, Zhang Hai didn't know this. He only knew that Akita Jinwoo was no longer looking at him, which made him relax a lot. However, in Akita Jinwoo's opinion, Zhang Hai was relaxed because he didn't seem to be looking at him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile disdainfully. Zhang Hai was still too young. He didn't look at him now because he wanted to pull him down from the altar once and for all in the future. However, even if Zhang Hai knew his thoughts, he probably wouldn't care. He really wanted to see what this guy would look like after inspecting his own forage. It would definitely be wonderful. Over the next few days, Zhang Hai imagined that the Akita family would come to find trouble with him, but that didn't happen. Every day, he and Du Feimin stayed in the ranch, looking at the cattle and sheep, looking at the pasture. To be honest, when Zhang Hai looked at such a large ranch, he was somewhat moved.
If he had millions of cows, and the average price of a cow was $140,000, he could earn $140 billion a year. In other words, 140 billion?
Well, Zhang Hai was just thinking about it. He could guarantee that if he raised so many cows and sold them at this price, he would never have a day of peace. Whether it was the American government or the Huaxia government, they would come looking for him. If they were polite, they would cooperate with him. If they weren't polite, they would directly force him to hand over the secret recipe, and they might even cut him up for research. After all, it was assets worth hundreds of billions of dollars a year. No matter which country it was, they would be eyeing this money. Definitely. Thus, for his own safety, Zhang Hai felt that it was better for him to keep a low profile and slowly make money. He didn't need to take too big a step, or he would pull his balls.
He believed that with his annual income of over $1 billion, if he provoked people, he could deal with them with the $2 billion in oil futures in his hands.
But he might not be able to do anything more than that. Protecting oneself was one of the most important things in this world. Ancestral Gragon was a legendary quasi-sage, but Zhang Hai wasn't. He didn't know why his scales had evolved into dragon scales. Let alone some spells, he couldn't even fly. For 2 days and 3 nights, Zhang Hai and Du Feimin stayed in the ranch. Zhang Hai discovered that Du Feimin didn't use a cowboy to herd the cattle, but instead, he used a helicopter to herd the cattle. At the same time, 5 helicopters took off and flew at a low altitude to herd the cattle within a certain range. Although the sound was a bit loud, the cows looked quite gentle. Tycoons herding cows were different from ordinary rich people like Zhang Hai and the others. After visiting for 2 days, Zhang Hai and the others rested there for the night. The next morning, they took a car and left the ranch. Of course, on the way back, Zhang Hai almost vomited. The desert was really shaking, not at all lower than the waves on the sea. After returning to Dubai, Zhang Hai rested for the night. The next day, he bought a lot of things, mainly souvenirs. What souvenirs were there in Dubai? In fact, there were only 2 kinds of souvenirs that needed to be brought. One was saffron, and the other was gold. For once, Zhang Hai was a tycoon. According to the number of people, each person got a pile of gold jewelry, and there was also a lot of saffron. Including the luxury clothes, bags, and so on that Zhang Hai sent back after he finished shopping, he spent almost $2 million on this trip to Dubai, not including the plane ticket. Of course, for Zhang Hai, this was just a drop in the bucket. His cows had already earned so much. He believed that his fish would earn even more, and even more. After all, he was born with a lot of good fish, such as the bluefin golden spear in the fishery, the large yellow croaker, the Yangtze River grenadier, and the Chinese bahaba that he cultivated, plus the salmon, tiger spots, king crabs, dragon crab, lobster. He could almost see Franklin waving at him. After a round of shopping, Zhang Hai and Azalina boarded the plane back to the imperial capital. Compared to when he went, it was much cheaper when he came back. The official cabin only cost 20,000 yuan, and that was including tax. The first-class cabin that Zhang Hai bought was about 50,000 yuan, which was much cheaper than when he came, but the flight time was also much shorter, only about 7 hours. They got on the plane in the morning and were about to arrive in the evening. When the plane landed at the capital airport, Zhang Hai couldn't help but stretch again. To be honest, flying was really tiring. Firstly, the plane was very small, and he couldn't get up and move around casually. Secondly, it was always the same white clouds outside the window, and he really got tired of it. Fortunately, Zhang Hai was sitting in the first-class cabin, and he could still lie down and play games on the iPad. If he was sitting in the economy cabin, it would be very depressing. But fortunately, they finally arrived. After taking their luggage, Zhang Hai and Azalina deliberately changed into thicker clothes, which were actually the clothes they wore when they came from Boston, and then they left. When they walked out of the waiting hall, they saw 4 beautiful women at a glance. At this time, they were standing in the distance, shivering and laughing, waiting for them. These guys. Looking at the 4 beautiful women, Jiang Hai's face showed a warm smile. Chapter 664. Are you stupid? It's winter. Why don't you go in and wait for us? Looking at the 4 women shivering in the cold, Jiang Hai walked over quickly and looked at the 4 familiar faces in front of him. He couldn't help but complain. Humph, I know you don't pay attention to our situation. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunchen, who was waiting for him, couldn't help but pat him and said, Yes, the people waiting for Jiang Hai here at this time are none other than Delina, Marian, Ai Xueqi, and Feng Yunchen. Although Delina and Marian came back with Bernice and Little Ye, after they came back, they saw Ai Xueqi and Feng Yunchen. After the 6 women played together for a day, Bernice and Little Ye left by plane because they had to return to their home. As for Delina and Marian, they followed Ai Xueqi and Feng Yunchen to wait for Jiang Hai in the imperial capital so that they could go back together. After all, the purpose of Jiang Hai's return this year is not only for the new year, but he also has the most important thing to do, move the grave. As Jiang Hai's women, they can't not go. Even if Jiang Hai doesn't say it, they have to go. So Ai Xueqi didn't prepare to go home this year, but fortunately, she went back in November. She told her parents that Jiang Hai was going to move the grave. Her parents naturally didn't say anything. In their opinion, Ai Xueqi found a trustworthy person. Ha! What's wrong with you? Have you become a public enemy? You don't even dare to pick me up at the airport? Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask with some surprise. I just left not long ago. Why are there so many things happening? You really don't pay attention to Sister Ai and Sister Feng. They are now internet celebrities. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina couldn't help but smile and say, Ba ba ba, little brat, don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Internet celebrities are words of abuse. Glancing at Delina, Feng Yunchen looked at her and said. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Daliana couldn't help but stick out her tongue before running to Jiang Hai's side with a smile. What's going on? Jiang Hai was a little confused when he heard what Daliana said. Jiang Hai had heard of internet celebrities before. However, that kind of thing was indeed similar to scolding people. The so-called internet celebrities were internet celebrities. The earliest internet celebrities were internet singers and such. Later on, they gradually disappeared. Now, the so-called internet celebrities mainly referred to the broadcasting industry. Of course, there were also some people who inexplicably became popular on the internet. As for Ai Xueqi and Feng Yunchen's popularity, after all, they didn't do live broadcasts or anything like that. With Jiang Hai around, they didn't lack money. The reason why they became famous was mainly because of the photos they took at Jiang Hai's place. Although because of their relationship with Jiang Hai, some of the photos were deleted. However, because of their beautiful appearance and the perfect scenery at Jiang Hai's place, these photos still attracted the attention of many otakus on Huaxia's internet. At this time, Feng Yunchen was titled as the otaku's big sister, and Ai Xueqi was fully deserving of the title as the otaku's goddess. The Weibo account opened by the 2 of them used to only have a few thousand zombie fans, all of which were bought by the company. But now, all of them have become millions. Especially in the imperial capital, they are still quite famous. Some rich people even took the initiative to go to their company to discuss business. It was inevitable that they would want to meet the 2 of them. But at this time, the company's manager would say that the company behind the 2 of them is the Qi Group. Some of these people could be provoked, but most of them could not be provoked. However, even if they could be provoked, they would not be able to do so. However, even if they can, they will definitely not have any conflict with the Qi Group because of these 2 women. One must know that the Qi Group is now a huge monster. These 2 people didn't go in and wait because they were afraid that they would be recognized after going in. That would be troublesome. Are you stupid? If you are afraid of being recognized, then go in and wait in the car. Hearing the explanation of the 2 women, Jiang Hai really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because he usually didn't go to the domestic internet, he really didn't know that they were popular. Aren't we hoping that you will see us when you come out? Really, you have no conscience. Glancing at Jiang Hai, Feng Yunchen patted Jiang Hai's arm again. This guy is too unromantic. Hearing Feng Yunshen's words, Zhang Hai also smiled and touched his nose. There is a saying that it is the hardest to enjoy a beauty's grace.
In the past, Zhang Hai was often impulsive, and then he would do that. But now it seems that it is indeed his own women who seem to have too many.
Let's not talk about it. Let's go home first. Hugging the cold Feng Yunshen and Ai Xiaoxi, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the few people here had no opinion. They got into a business car that Feng Yunshen specially borrowed, and the group drove to Feng Yunshen's house. Feng Yunshen's house was a 2-bedroom house, so it was divided into 2 rooms to sleep. Originally, Delina and Marian lived in Ai Xiaoxi's room. Today, Azalina was added. As for Zhang Hai, after dinner, he took a shower and went into Feng Yunshen's room. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Tonight, the 3 of them would probably have to spend some time together. The next day, Zhang Hai and the others had a good rest in this house. By the way, Zhang Hai also distributed the things he bought to everyone. Those famous luxury goods, as well as gold jewelry. There was no woman who didn't like glittering things. Seeing these things handed over by Zhang Hai, even Delina and Marian were very excited. They wore them proudly. Looking at their satisfied looks, Zhang Hai also smiled knowingly. He didn't care about money, but it could make him and the people around him happy. This was the most important thing. Everyone played at home for a day. Indeed, there was no place to play. The smog in the capital was particularly serious. Going out was almost the same as waiting for lung explosion. Now it was winter, and there was no place to play. Zhang Hai and the others were not willing to go to nightclubs, bars, and the like, so they played at home for a day. On the 3rd day after Zhang Hai came to the capital, they took a plane back. Before going back, he specially called Qili and told her that he would go back first. At this time, Qili was not in the capital, but in Shanghai, discussing a business deal. She told Zhang Hai that she must go when Zhang Hai's parents moved the grave. During the new year, Zhang Hai also had to go to her house and stay for at least 2 days. This was also the idea of Qili's mother. Zhang Hai didn't care about it. He just told her that she could call him when she came back. They took a plane back to Bing City. Naturally, Zhang Hai's friends came to pick him up after knowing that he was back. They looked at Feng Yunshen, Ai Xiaoxi, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian who were beside Zhang Hai. To be honest, it would be a lie if they said that they were not envious. Unfortunately, they were not as capable as Zhang Hai. After sending Zhang Hai and the others back home, Zhang Hai began to get busy. First, he went to buy the grave. In the past, he didn't have money, so he didn't buy a grave. But now, Zhang Hai had money. He wanted to buy the best grave in the best cemetery near Bing City. A small grave cost 1.2 million yuan. If he paid the full amount, he would be exempted from 10 years of maintenance. Zhang Hai had nothing to say. 1.2 million yuan was less than $200,000, and Zhang Hai could afford it. He paid the full amount and then paid the maintenance fee for 50 years. After that, Feng Yu asked his men to tell them about moving the grave. His men knew about these things. Of course, these were superstitions. The date, time, and many other things. Zhang Hai had a headache when he heard this. Indeed, moving the grave was the same as burying the dead. It was hard to understand if one didn't earn the money. Zhang Hai was also confused, but it did not stop him from doing these things. Although many people would say, "What's the use of these things?" They were unfilial when they were alive, and they would scream when they were dead. It was troublesome and expensive, and it also promoted superstition. But what should be done must be done, according to the words of the master here. Zhang Hai wanted to move the grave. It was better to wait until 3 years. But Zhang Hai was in a hurry. He could move the grave after this Lunar New Year. This year's Lunar New Year's Eve is February 7th, and the grave cannot be moved before the 15th. That means the grave cannot be moved before the 22nd. Looking at the dates, the earliest was February 25th. Other than that, there were no good days in the next month. Zhang Hai calculated in his heart. In March, he would have to sell grass and fish, so it would be impossible to delay until March or April. That would be his busiest time. If he really couldn't do it, then the 25th would be fine. He had already set a time with the master here. As for the price, Jiang Hai didn't care. He would just spend money to get it done. Although this business was profitable, living people spent money, more or less, to buy peace of mind. Therefore, Jiang Hai directly asked for the highest standard. He was prepared to pay $100,000 for these things. The cost of the grave was not included. He was prepared to pay so much just for this. When the man heard Jiang Hai's words, he was naturally very happy. This was because his family sold these things. Basically, these people sold these things together. Jiang Hai's business could earn him at least 300,000 yuan. Of course he could earn more than that. But for a big customer like Jiang Hai, he didn't dare to cheat him too much. Because Jiang Hai could take out $100,000 to pay for his family's funeral. Who knew if he would take out $200,000 to take his life? When dealing with such a rich man, it was better to make money honestly. There was no need to think about other things. In addition to these things, Jiang Hai also had to arrange a motorcade to go to the funeral. So far, there were 7 people who would definitely go. Himself, Qi Li, Azalina, Daliana, Marian, Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, and his friends. Adding them together there were 4 people. Maybe He Xia would also go. Jiang Hai did not know if the others would go, but it was better to prepare a few cars in advance. After everything was settled, Jiang Hai went to have fun with his friends for a few days. After all, before the new year, everyone was relatively free. They gathered together almost every day, playing mahjong, drinking, and even playing games in internet cafes. It could be said that Jiang Hai and his friends were quite free. Of course, Jiang Hai did not forget that Jiang Hai said that he would take Azalina and the others to eat dog meat. Otherwise, they might not open it during the new year. They went to a dog meat restaurant that Jiang Hai used to go to and had a good meal. There were braised dog meat stewed with tofu, dog meat pot, spicy dog meat. The table was full of dishes. In the beginning, when they did not know that it was dog meat, Daliana and Marian enjoyed it very much. But after knowing that it was dog meat, the 2 girls could not eat anymore. Indeed, for people who were not used to eating dog meat was a little difficult to accept. Looking at them, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen laughed happily. In fact, the people who ate dog meat were mainly Han people. This had been passed down since ancient times. In ancient times, cows were not eaten casually. They were the main labor force. Every cow had to be registered. Pigs were very dirty in people's eyes. Because they had not been fried, the taste of their meat was not good. At that time, high officials and nobles mainly ate mutton, while ordinary people ate dog meat. There was an old saying, hanging sheep's head but selling dog meat. Only some nomads, for them, dogs were their assistants in life. For example, when they went hunting, dogs were a member of the family. So for these nomads, they would not eat these dogs. After eating dog meat and playing, time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was February 6th. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. Today, Qi Li also came back from the capital. No matter how busy she was, she still had to go home during the new year. After coming back, she was not in a hurry to go home. Instead, she went to Jiang Hai's house first. In the evening, she specially called Jiang Hai to their new house and stayed there for a night. Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi had already made up for the past few days, so they did not care about these few days. However, Qi Li missed Jiang Hai very much since the last time she saw Jiang Hai. That night, Qi Li was very crazy. So the next morning, they were awakened by a call from Qi Li's mother, who asked them to go to lunch. After cleaning up, the 2 hurriedly left home and drove Qi Li's car to the Qi family's villa. After Jiang Hai and Qi Li parked their car outside the Qi family's villa, the 2 walked to the front door and gently knocked on it, waiting for someone to open the door from the inside. Sure enough, after knocking on the door, footsteps came from inside. Under the gaze of Jiang Hai and Qi Li, the door was slowly opened. However, the moment the door opened, Jiang Hai was stunned. Chapter 665. Sister, this is brother-in-law, right? Hello, brother-in-law. In Jiang Hai's eyes, a pure white elf was standing in front of him at this time, looking at him with a smile. Looking at her silver white hair, white and tender skin, and that familiar face, Jiang Hai was completely stunned. Littleya, you're back. When did you come back? Seeing the girl in front of her, Qi Li was very excited. She happily hugged the girl in front of her into her arms, and then said while jumping, "I just came back a few days ago.
Wasn't I in the United States with second sister for treatment?"
While jumping there with Qi Li, the girl's eyes were still gently glancing at Zhang Hai. Seeing her gaze, Zhang Hai subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. What's going on? Zhang Hai, let me introduce you. This is my youngest sister, Chia. You should have met her when you were young. This is Zhang Hai, your brother-in-law. After Qi Li finished talking to Chia, she turned her gaze to Zhang Hai and began to introduce the two of them. Hello. Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai was embarrassed. He felt that the air was frozen at this time. What should he say now? Pretend not to know her? He couldn't do it. But if he wanted to say that he knew her, how did he know her? Now, Zhang Hai's mind was blank. He seemed to. Little Ye was here, then her sister Bernice, should be Qi Li's second sister. It seemed that he had inadvertently, probably, some unspeakable secret had happened between him and his two sisters-in-law. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't wait to turn around and run away. It's too embarrassing. Zhang Hai couldn't help but however, he knew that he couldn't run, so he felt like a machine without oil. It was as if every step he took was very difficult. Is little Jie back too? But fortunately, Qi Li was immersed in the joy of her sister's return at this time. She looked at Chia and asked her. Second sister is also back, but she went out to buy something now. She will be back in a while. Hearing Qi Li's words, Chia also said with a smile. Looking at the faint smile on her face, Qi Li also smiled contentedly. This time, their family was finally together. I'll go see Mom first. After saying a few words to Chia, Qi Li took off her shoes and ran into the house. As for Zhang Hai, he fell behind. Relax, otherwise it will be exposed. Seeing that Zhang Hai seemed to be frozen by the air around him, little Ye, oh no, Chia walked in front of Zhang Hai and pretended to help Zhang Hai find slippers. In fact, she whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. Feeling the air she breathed into his ear, Zhang Hai was even more at a loss. No matter how much he thought about it, he never thought that it would be such a coincidence that Bernice and Xiaoye were actually Qi Li's younger sisters. Is there a mistake? Are you really Qi Li's sister? Seeing that Chia was about to leave after finishing her words, Zhang Hai immediately grabbed her hand and asked in a low voice. Of course, it's the real deal. Haven't you experienced it? Tell me the truth. Which of us three sisters is the most comfortable? Looking at Zhang Hai, little Ye didn't know if it was because she had suffered a loss or been drenched in the rain. She took the opportunity to whisper in Zhang Hai's ear. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai's face turned red. It was the first time that he had heard such shameless words. Let's go in. Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, little Ye also laughed and walked into the room first. Walking into the living room of the villa, he found that Qi Li was already chatting with her mother. Zhang Xueqi, whom Zhang Hai had met before, stood beside them. She was listening to them while preparing tea and snacks. Seeing that Zhang Hai walked in, Qi Li's mother couldn't help but stand up and look at Zhang Hai with a smile. Little Zhang, you're here. Come, take a seat. After greeting Zhang Hai, Qi Li's mother pulled Zhang Hai to sit beside her, which made Zhang Hai more embarrassed. As for little Ye, she sat beside Zhang Hai with a smile. Feeling these people around him, Zhang Hai's body became stiff. Little Zhang, you should know my daughter. This is my younger daughter, Chia. She has been suffering from an annoying disease, albinism, since she was a child. Her second sister is studying medicine, so she has been receiving treatment in the United States. However, unlike Boston, where you live, they live in the southernmost Miami. I haven't seen them for several years. This year, little Ye's disease has been alleviated and she can move normally under the sun, so they came back. You're all in the United States. If anything happens to them in the future, you have to help take care of them. Seeing that Zhang Hai and little Ye sat down, Qi Li's mother took Zhang Hai's hand and said earnestly. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai really didn't know what to say. How could he take care of them? He had already taken care of them to bed. If he continued to take care of them, would they have to give birth to several babies? Ahem, Mom, look at what you're saying. My brother-in-law is shy. Looking at Zhang Hai's body that couldn't be any stiffer, Chiya's heart was still good. She couldn't help but stand up and say something to Qi Li's mother, helping Zhang Hai out of this predicament. Yes. But if you have any problems, you can go to your brother-in-law. Your brother-in-law is very powerful now.
After you came back, the delicious beef you ate was brought by your brother-in-law.
Hearing her younger daughter's words, Qi Li's mother couldn't help but smile kindly. Then she praised Zhang Hai, which made Zhang Hai a little embarrassed. Obviously, Qi Li's mother knew that Zhang Hai was not the same as before, so she kept praising Zhang Hai. Of course, in fact, Zhang Hai having a promising future was the scene she was most willing to see. If it wasn't for the stability of the beginning, she wouldn't have let her daughter marry Zhang Hai. If Zhang Hai was always mud that couldn't support the wall, then she would feel sorry for her daughter. Now that Zhang Hai had some power, he was a good match for her daughter. This was even better. Mom, don't worry. If second sister and third sister have any problems in the United States, Zhang Hai will definitely help. Hearing her mother's words, Qi Li also said with a smile at this time. Hearing this, Zhang Hai, who had nothing to say, lowered his head even more. It was really because he didn't know what he should say at this time. It was really too embarrassing. Fortunately, there was still Zhang Xueqi who could help Zhang Hai feel embarrassed because she would pour tea for Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai just focused on fighting with the tea leaves. But drinking too much tea was also a problem. In less than half an hour, Zhang Hai felt that his lower abdomen was a little bloated. He took the initiative to say that and went to pee. As a result, when he went to the toilet, he thought that it was meaningless to go out so quickly and listen to the three of them. It was better to stay in the toilet for a while, so he squatted in the toilet for more than 10 minutes and played a game before coming out. But just as he came out, he saw the door next to him was opened, and then Bernice walked in with a bunch of things. It really is you. When Bernice and Zhang Hai's eyes met, Zhang Hai's last hope was shattered. It really was her. Hey, you are here. Are you happy with this surprise? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Bernice put down the things with a smile and walked over carefully. She glanced at the people in the room and didn't pay attention to them, so she smiled and said to Zhang Hai. There is no surprise, but there is a lot of fright. What should I call you now? Bernice, Qi Jia, or sister-in-law? Looking at Bernice, Zhang Hai said somewhat speechlessly. He really inadvertently did something that angered people and gods. It's up to you, but when we do that, do you want me to call you husband? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Bernice walked over, gently tapped Zhang Hai's chest with her fingertips, and then said sweetly in Zhang Hai's ear. Before Zhang Hai could react, she had already put her arms around Zhang Hai's neck and took the initiative to kiss him. Their lips and teeth intertwined. He had to admit that kissing his sister-in-law here was really too embarrassing. Zhang Hai wanted to push her away in a panic, but she grabbed Zhang Hai's hand and pressed it against her upper body. Hey, you are looking for death. After a long time, Zhang Hai looked at Bernice and said with some fear. If this was seen, he couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. Of course the premise was that he was not that clean. Tisk, coward, I'll come to you at night. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Jia, who was also Bernice, gave him a stern look, and then walked in with her things with a smile. As for Zhang Hai, he wiped his mouth again. After making sure that there was nothing special on his face, he walked back to the villa's living room. Naturally, after he went in, there was a new round of introductions. Bernice's acting was also good. She pretended that it was the first time she saw Zhang Hai. Indeed, Qi could say that she had seen Zhang Hai when she was young. However, this was the first time Qi Jia had seen Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai's awkwardness seemed to have relapsed. Although in this home, Zhang Hai felt particularly awkward, the overall atmosphere was still very good. Everyone was together for the new year. After dinner in the evening, at 8 o'clock, they watched the New Year's Gala while making dumplings. Although this year's New Year's Gala was really not that good, everyone was more to experience this kind of atmosphere of reunion. By the time the New Year's Gala ended, it was already late at night. Except for Zhang Hai, everyone else was a little sleepy, especially Qi Li's mother. Old people were like this. They were sleepy especially early at night, but they also got up early in the morning. Qi Li's mother was like this. After eating the dumplings at 12 o'clock, everyone went back to rest. Zhang Hai naturally lived with Qi Li. After returning to the room, Zhang Hai went to take a shower first, but halfway through, Qili walked in. "Sir, do you want me to help you scrub your back?" Looking at Zhang Hai, Qili said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai smiled and stretched out his hand. Then Qili also stepped into the bathtub in the bathroom. Looking at Zhang Hai in front of her, she directly pounced on him. They didn't scrub his back, but except for his back, they rubbed the other place as well. An hour later, Qili lay in Zhang Hai's arms like a puddle of mud. Listening to Zhang Hai's strong heartbeat, Qili's face was full of a satisfied smile. They had just been crazy for more than 2 hours last night, and now it was late. Qili really didn't have much energy. After lying in the bathtub for about 10 minutes, Zhang Hai looked at her fingers that were already wrinkled and took the initiative to pick her up. After wiping her hands clean, he carried her to the bed in the room. As soon as Qili touched the bed, she turned over and was about to sleep. "Aren't you thirsty? Do you want some water?" Seeing that Qili was about to fall asleep, Zhang Hai couldn't help but push her and ask her. "Well, I'm too sleepy. I'm going to sleep directly. If you're thirsty, then go downstairs and get water. There's some in the refrigerator." Maybe Qili was really sleepy. She was too lazy to open her eyes and said to Zhang Hai. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but spank her butt. Then he put on his pajamas, left the room, and prepared to go downstairs to the kitchen to get water. But just as he walked to the stairs, a figure suddenly rushed out from the side and grabbed Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai fixed his eyes and found that the person who grabbed him was no one else but Bernice. "Oh, she should be called Qi Jie now. I've been waiting for you for an hour. You should have done it in the room. Humph. This guy really knows how to enjoy himself. Now you're mine." Looking at Zhang Hai's confused expression, Bernice whispered, then pulled Zhang Hai into her room. What happened next didn't need to be said. It was almost 1 o'clock when it was time to go to bed, but when Zhang Hai came out of Qi Jie's room, it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning. He was really thirsty. After coming out, he didn't go back to sleep directly. He still wanted to go downstairs to get water. But just as he walked to the kitchen, he found that Chia was in the kitchen at this time. Seeing Zhang Hai coming over, she also smiled and then hooked her finger at Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai also walked over as he wished. But first, he took the water and drank the water in the cup. Looking at the charming Chia in front of him, there was nothing to say. Anyway, it wasn't like they hadn't tried it in the kitchen. Chia bit her finger and endured the impact of shyness. The battle started again. When he returned to Qili's room again, it was already 5 o'clock in the morning. The sky outside was already bright. Zhang Hai was really tired. Doing that kind of thing was actually quite physically exhausting. Holding Qili, Zhang Hai slowly fell asleep. Chapter 666. Ha! Yawning, Qili walked down the stairs in a mess. She glanced at the living room. As expected of the new year, she slept too late last night. At this time in the living room, except for her mother, her 2 sisters were still asleep, and her husband, Zhang Hai, was still sleeping. Of course, she didn't know what happened last night. "You're up, did you sleep well?" Seeing her daughter coming down, Qili's mother, who was sitting on the sofa and watching TV at this time, couldn't help but smile and pat the seat next to her, saying to Qili. Hearing her mother's words, Qili also rushed over and sat there. "Not bad, after all, it's my own home. There's nothing I can't get used to." Looking at her mother with a smile, Qili said. "It's just the 2 of us now, so I have something to ask you. You and Zhang Hai have been married for almost 3 years, right?" Looking at Qili's appearance, Qili's mother also nodded with a smile, but then her face changed and she looked at Qili and asked. "Ah, this year is the 3rd year." Thinking about it, Zhang Hai and her got married. In fact, it hasn't been 2 years. But if one were to count the years, it had already been 3 years. Time really flew by in the blink of an eye. "I know that you don't like Zhang Hai. Tell me the truth, did you and Zhang Hai do the things that a husband and wife should do?" Looking at Qili's mother lowered her voice and asked her. She was really afraid of her daughter, who still maintained a pure relationship with Zhang Hai. Hearing her words, Qili's face suddenly turned red. "This is really not easy to answer. Well, we did that. Although we didn't see each other much, when we met, we would do that." But although her face was very red, She still hesitated and said. Hearing her words, Qi Li's mother also nodded. As long as her daughter accepted Zhang Hai, it was a good thing. Since you and he have done that, what protection do you have? Looking at Qi Li, her mother continued to ask. No, Zhang Hai doesn't like it. Thinking of Zhang Hai's habits, Qi Li couldn't help but secretly snort. Zhang Hai's habits are really not good. That's strange. Why didn't you get pregnant? Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Li's mother couldn't help but say with some hesitation. Well, it's true, except for when I am not very convenient. We have done it a lot of times, but we really didn't have a baby. Hearing her mother's words, Qi Li couldn't help but say with some doubts. In fact, she originally wanted to say that in addition to her, Zhang Hai actually has a lot of women, and Zhang Hai didn't bring those things or let them take medicine. Under such circumstances, Zhang Hai actually didn't have a single woman. This is indeed a bit strange. Thinking about it carefully, is there something wrong with Zhang Hai? In the next few days, I will take you to check. See if you can check Zhang Hai's side. Old people are eager to have grandchildren. It has been 3 years, and her daughter's stomach hasn't shown any signs of pregnancy. It is impossible for her not to be anxious. Zhang Hai, I don't think he will go. Thinking of Zhang Hai, what he is most afraid of is embarrassment. He probably won't go. Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Li's mother couldn't help but be a little depressed. But then she thought about it. Qi Li's mother whispered to Qi Li. Maybe they can change their thinking. It doesn't matter if Zhang Hai goes or not. As long as he goes to check the things he wants to check, then it will be fine. Although it is reasonable to say that it needs to be 4 days of abstinence for it to be effective, Zhang Hai should have no problem. While the mother and daughter were studying there, it was already noon in the blink of an eye. Qi Jie, Qi Ya, and Zhang Hai also came out of the room. Today is the first day of the new year. It can be regarded as the real new year. Zhang Hai had already distributed the gifts yesterday. Fortunately, he brought a lot of things, including gold jewelry and luxury goods, so the 2 sisters-in-law who suddenly appeared didn't have a New Year's gift. But in fact, the gifts that Zhang Hai prepared for them have already been sent back to Winthrop. It can only be said that these 2 guys are lucky. After staying at home for a day on the first day of the new year, they naturally have to stay here at night. As long as Zhang Hai and Qi Li slept together, Qi Li would naturally have needs. But today, Qi Li was a little strange. Although she still didn't bring a raincoat, she asked Zhang Hai to put it on her. Zhang Hai also listened to her opinion. After finishing, Zhang Hai went to drink water. As for Qi Li, she quietly collected the things on her body and put them in a sealed container that has been sterilized. She decided that after sending Zhang Hai home tomorrow, she will go to the hospital to check on herself and Zhang Hai. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, Qi Li sent Zhang Hai home. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, who hadn't seen Zhang Hai for 3 days, missed him very much when they saw him. Although they knew that these 2 little sluts were with Zhang Hai, nothing good would happen. But Qi Li had more important things to do, so she left. After going to the hospital, she and Zhang Hai's things were tested. Based on the people that Qi Li's mother found, they quickly came to the conclusion that Qi Li's body was fine. Of course, there were many things that needed to be checked, but at first glance, there was no problem. As for Zhang Hai's things, there was no problem either. The only problem was that Zhang Hai's things were too strong and had a strong survival ability. In other words, it was very strong. In other words, Zhang Hai's things were fighting in Qi Li and Feng Yunchen's bodies, fighting for the opportunity to merge. Basically, before the boss was chosen, they all died. That was why they got pregnant. Sometimes, being too thin and weak was a problem. Being too strong was also a problem. Fortunately, it didn't prevent them from getting pregnant. It was just that the chances were lower. Who knew when the boss would get pregnant? And it was foreseeable that the quality would be quite good. For such a result, Qi Li and Feng Yunchen really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fortunately, nothing happened, and that was the most important thing. Zhang Hai didn't know about these things. After he returned home, he accompanied Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen for a few days. On the 15th day of the month, he went to Qi Li's house to stay for 2 days. Then it was the day that he set to move the graves. Qi Li could have had an earlier holiday, but she had to stay at home for a while during the new year. In addition, Zhang Hai needed to move the graves, so he had to wait for a while before he went back to work. That was why he was so busy and came back so late. Now that he had some time, he could stay at home until March, and then go back to work in the capital. Early in the morning, many cars drove to Zhang Hai's house. These cars were all black Bentleys, which Qili found. After learning that Zhang Hai was going to move the graves, she paid attention to it. Naturally, Zhang Hai didn't need to worry about the motorcade. Zhang Hai's friends also came. When they saw Bernice, oh no, Qijie and Qia, they were stunned. When they went to visit Zhang Hai, they saw Qijie and Qia, but they didn't know the relationship between them and Qili. Therefore, they thought that Zhang Hai directly brought them back. They had to admit that as Zhang Hai, he had money and girls. What was there to be dissatisfied with? In addition to Zhang Hai's women and friends, the only person who didn't know his friends and women well was Xia. Today, Xia came with her 4-year-old son. Zhang Hai saw her once when her son was born, but he didn't see her again. Seeing Zhang Hai's extravagance, Xia, who had some doubts about whether Zhang Hai was really in the United States, was completely convinced at this time. It seemed that her cousin was not an ordinary person. According to Bing City's customs, they had to admit that it was really troublesome. Fortunately, the cremated remains of Zhang Hai's parents were placed in the crematorium, and the other party had already prepared everything. There was no need to set up a grave, pick up the bones, or make a grave mound. But even so, Zhang Hai was still very busy. From 5 a.m. to dawn, the motorcade set off. It was not until 11 a.m. that everything was done. Then they went to the restaurant Zhang Hai booked for a meal to thank him for his help. You're doing well now. Aunt's spirit in heaven will be very pleased to see you like this. After greeting everyone, Zhang Hai returned to the restaurant. He sat there and was about to take a bite, but at this time, Xia came over with her son in her arms. She looked at Zhang Hai and said with a smile, "I hope so." Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also smiled. A child wants to support his parents, but the parents are not there. This sentence could not be more appropriate for him. Which one is your wife? And these are? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xia looked at the other people at the table and asked with some doubts. Those men were naturally Zhang Hai's friends. But when she came, she was very interested in the 3 foreign women and the large group of women. Now that they were all sitting together, she was even more interested. Oh, this is my wife, Qili. You should have met her before. These 2 are my adopted daughters in the United States, Delina and Maxianen. These 2 are Qili's sisters, Qijie and Qia. The remaining 3 are my friends. This is my former classmate, Feng Yunchen. This is Ai Xiaoxi. This is Azalina Vicabrio. This is my uncle's cousin, Xia, and this is my nephew. Hearing Xia's words, Zhang Hai remembered that he hadn't introduced them to them yet, so he immediately stood up and introduced them to them. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xia shook hands with Qili first. Her husband was also a businessman. Although his assets were only a few million, he often took her to some high-end places. Therefore, her eyes were still very sharp when it came to clothes, jewelry, and the like. Whether it was Qili, Delina, Maxianen, Qia, Qijie, Azalina, or Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi's clothes were all from very expensive brands, especially Qili. The clothes she was wearing should be tailor-made for Burberry. The coat alone was worth 150,000 yuan, and the clothes inside were even more expensive. Her clothes were almost 400,000 yuan in total, not including the watches, bags and shoes, which were also extremely luxurious brands. Her entire outfit was worth at least 3 to 5 million yuan. Moreover, she had a luxurious aura and spoke very appropriately. In an instant, she gave people a feeling that they could only look up to her. However, what surprised her was that such a noble and domineering older sister was wearing a set of gold jewelry at this time. In an instant, she felt that her level had been lowered. In fact, it was reasonable to say that Qili usually didn't wear gold jewelry. Although platinum and diamonds would lose money when they were bought, it was still better than wearing gold jewelry. Therefore, not only Qili, but also Qia and Qijie usually didn't wear gold jewelry. But now, they were wearing gold jewelry because these things were given to them by Zhang Hai, which was the most important thing. Hello, sister. Oh, this handsome boy, how old is he? Hearing Zhang Hai's introduction, Qili also turned her head and said to Xia lightly, Then she looked at Hexia's 4-year-old son. But obviously, Hexia's 4-year-old son was a little timid. As soon as he saw Qi Li's head come closer, he took the initiative to run behind Hexia and looked at her timidly. It's the first time we meet. Zhang Hai didn't tell me, and I didn't prepare anything. Well, here is 1,000 yuan. Take it as a meeting gift for the child. As Qi Li said, she took out 1,000 yuan from her bag and was about to put it in Hexia's hand. No, it's not the new year or a festival. It's not necessary. However, Hexia didn't take it. Instead, she took her son back and avoided the money that Qi Li put in her hand. Qi Li also smiled. Huaxia's people were like this. When they gave money to others, they would refuse it. Sister, it's not for you. It's for the child, isn't it? As Qi Li said, she took a step forward and continued to put the money in Hexia's hand. I can't accept the money. If sister-in-law is really sincere, the day after tomorrow is my dad's 60th birthday. You and Zhang Hai must come. Looking at Qi Li in front of her, Hexia shook her head firmly, and then said with a serious face, Ugh. The day after tomorrow? Hearing Hexia's words, Qi Li looked at Zhang Hai behind her with a trace of inquiry in her eyes. Zhang Hai sighed helplessly. He knew that sometimes, favors couldn't be avoided. Okay, sister. It's uncle's birthday the day after tomorrow. I will definitely be there. Even if it was only for the sake of Hexia's face today, Zhang Hai must go. Chapter 667. Huaxia was too big, and every region had different customs. For example, some provinces and cities in the south were particular about men having their birthdays close to each other and women having their birthdays full. The meaning was simple. Men's birthdays were close to each other, and women's birthdays were full. For example, for men's 60th birthday, they had to celebrate their birthdays at 59 years old, and women had to celebrate their birthdays at 60 years old. But in Bing City, it was different. Zhang Hai's eldest uncle was 60 years old this year, and in today's society, 60 years old was not considered old. Most people chose not to celebrate their birthdays, but Zhang Hai's eldest uncle still chose to celebrate his birthdays. After all, this was considered his official retirement. This morning, his eldest uncle and his family changed into new clothes and coats and went to the hotel they booked. They were waiting for the guests to come and celebrate his birthday. That's right. He did not put it at home. He put it at the hotel. Zhang Hai's eldest uncle had 2 daughters, and both daughters had 2 son-in-laws who were doing business. Naturally, they had a lot of friends. In addition to Zhang Hai's relatives, as well as Zhang Hai's aunt's relatives, there were quite a lot of people. There were about 6 or 7 tables. The people who came first went to find a place to play cards or mahjong. Of course, most of the people were there to chat. The dinner was booked at 11:30 p.m. Zhang Hai really did not want to come. He wanted to come on time, but Qi Li did not think so. Zhang Hai was not on good terms with his relatives, but Qi Li was his daughter-in-law, and she had to come earlier. Zhang Hai did not want to bring her along, but she knew that it was not good for her not to come. He was in a dilemma. In the end, Zhang Hai and Qi Li arrived at 11 p.m. They drove Qi Li's car. When they arrived at the hotel, the receptionist saw them and went up to them. This receptionist was He Yu's friend, and Zhang Hai had met him before. After exchanging some pleasantries, they walked into the lobby and paid the red packet at the entrance. Zhang Hai had wanted to give them 500 renminbi. Anyway, he did not prepare for it, and his family could still return it. But Qi Li did not feel good. Zhang Hai and Qi Li were not short of money. Although he was 60 years old and did not have a good life, he still gave them a red packet of 2,000 renminbi. Zhang Hai was quite reluctant to give it. After receiving the red packet, Zhang Hai and Qi Li entered the lobby. When Zhang Hai and Qi Li walked in, many people looked at them. Of course, they were not looking at Zhang Hai, but at Qi Li. Qi Li was really beautiful. In addition, she was wearing expensive clothes and had the aura of an iceberg CEO. No matter where she went, she was the absolute center of attention. The moment Qi Li walked in, both men and women turned to look at them. Of course, the men were looking at Qi Li's extremely good looks. Even if she was wearing winter clothes, she still had a very good figure. The women were looking at Qi Li's clothes, bags, and jewelry. But when they found that those things seemed to be very expensive, they were a little disdainful. In their opinion, these clothes might be real. However, such a set of clothes must be fake. In their eyes, Qi Li was wearing a fake set of clothes. If Qi Li knew what they were thinking, she would probably laugh. At this time, Zhang Hai's relatives also saw Zhang Hai and Qi Li. After Zhang Hai walked in, he actually saw these people from afar, but he didn't want to talk to them. He just went to his uncle, wished him happiness, and introduced Qi Li to him. Then, he found a corner to eat melon seeds. Qi Li didn't have any intention to understand these people, so she sat next to Zhang Hai and talked to him about the restaurant. Yo brother, I heard from Sister Yu that you were in Dubai. Didn't you have time to come? How did you get the time? While Zhang Hai and Qi Li were chatting, a girl who seemed to be in her 20s came over with a boy who was about the same age as her. She asked Zhang Hai with a smile. The boy beside her kept his head down and glanced at Qi Li. Indeed, compared to Qi Li, this girl, whether it was her aura or her appearance, was much worse. This girl was called He Rue, the daughter of Zhang Hai's second uncle. She was 23 years old this year and had just graduated from college. It was said that she worked in a medical equipment company, and the boy next to her was her boyfriend, the owner of the company. In this era, the medical equipment business had no dignity. Doctors and nurses could make them bleed, but they did make a lot of money, especially when it was related to the state. For example, when the heart stents were produced, the materials, labor, taxes, and so on were all included. When it was sold, the domestic stents were sold for 12,000 yuan, and the imported ones were sold at a sky-high price, and the medical insurance didn't reimburse them. However, you had to buy them. This was the reality. Therefore, the medical equipment business made a lot of money. However, no matter how much money they made, they couldn't make as much as Zhang Hai and Qi Li. The Qi Group, which was controlled by Qi Li, had a total market value of more than 20 billion yuan, of which it had increased by nearly 7 billion yuan this year. The Qi family held more than half of the shares, monopolizing more than 10 billion yuan. When it was distributed to Qi Li, it was at least 3 billion yuan. Therefore, she was a well-deserved rich woman. Of course, compared with Zhang Hai, there was still a big gap. In only 1 year, Zhang Hai had made 1.3 billion yuan from selling cattle, and 2 billion yuan from digging treasures in the sea. Zhang Hai's assets in terms of RMB were at least 20 billion yuan, not including the land of the manor. However, when the fishing season started next month, his assets should double again. According to his estimation, it shouldn't be a problem for him to double. The day before yesterday was the day your aunt moved her grave, so I definitely had to come back. Glancing at her, Zhang Hai said calmly. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, He Rue was at a loss for words, but still wore a disdainful expression on her face. In fact, these people all knew that Zhang Hai had moved his parents' graves, and He Xia was the only one who went there in the end. In their eyes, they didn't need this cousin of theirs. Since he wasn't needed, there was no need for him to attend such a thing and pay for it. Therefore, everyone pretended that they didn't know about it, but they couldn't say it out loud. Once Zhang Hai said it, they directly stopped talking. Of course, Zhang Hai didn't want to talk to her either. What was there to talk about? Cousin, right? Nice to meet you. My name is Dong Jian, and I'm Rui's boyfriend. May I know where you work? This should be sister-in-law, right? Feeling that she was suppressed by Zhang Hai, He Rue felt a little embarrassed, so she gently nudged her boyfriend who was staring at Qi Li with the tip of her elbow and asked him to speak. Her boyfriend reacted quickly and immediately said with a smile, "Oh, I raise cattle, and this is your sister-in-law." Looking at Dong Jian who came over, Zhang Hai didn't even look at him, and said while drinking tea. Looking at Zhang Hai's attitude, Dong Jian frowned. This Zhang Hai is a little arrogant. But he didn't stop there. Didn't Zhang Hai say that he was a cattle breeder? Raising cattle? Raising cattle? What can he do? Hey! Raising cattle to make money now? I heard that raising cattle can at most earn 800 to 1,000 renminbi per cow, and you still have to work hard for more than a year. It's not worth it. Why don't you come to my family's company for an interview? You can start from the bottom. You can get a guaranteed salary of 3,000 renminbi per month, and the commission will be calculated separately. If you do well, you will be my family, and I can promote you to a manager. Dong Jian looked at Zhang Hai and said to Zhang Hai. To him, what he said was very generous. The cost of living in Bing City was not high, and a new graduate can get 3,000 renminbi per month with commission. At Zhang Hai's age, of course, it was not the same as a new graduate. But the starting salary of 3,000 renminbi per month with commission was still very attractive to some office workers. If the market was not good, they could at least get 5,000 to 6,000 renminbi per month. If they had good connections, they could even get 10,000 renminbi per month. Dear, he doesn't want you to raise cattle, and he wants you to work. Hehe. What a joke. When Zhang Hai heard what Dong Jian said, he didn't know what to say. If it was a year ago, this might be a good job for him. But now. Ha ha. Qili laughed when she heard what Dong Jian said. She knew why Zhang Hai did not want to come to Bing City. Ha, sister-in-law, what's so funny about this? Dong Jian was stunned when he saw Qili's smile. But he reacted quickly and looked at Qili. Although he knew that Qili's words were not good, he was still willing to listen. I'm sorry. It's not that I look down on you and your company. But from the looks of it, my husband will not work at your company. Shaking her head, Qili couldn't help but say in a bureaucratic tone when she heard Dong Jian still wanted to ask why. These people are really outrageous. Ah. Dong Jian's face turned ugly when he heard Qili's reply. The conversation was killed again. Oh, brother is here. Little Rue is also here. Brother, aren't you in Dubai? Why are you back? But at this moment, their savior came. They only saw the youngest daughter of Zhang Hai's uncle, He Yu, coming over with a man who was much older than Zhang Hai. As soon as she came to Zhang Hai's table, she said sarcastically. It seemed that she had already told them everything about Zhang Hai being in Dubai. According to Zhang Hai's routine last year, they would believe that Zhang Hai had the money to go out and play. Didn't you hear what your sister said? If your sister didn't say it, then pretend that I didn't say it. Listening to He Yu's words, Zhang Hai shook his head. He was already a little lazy to explain these things because they had already determined that he was lying, so there was no need to explain. Dubai. Brother, you really dare to say that? I did some research. If you want to go to Dubai, it will cost about 30,000 yuan for 2 people. If you and that money, how good would it be for you and sister-in-law to live a good life? We are all family. Who doesn't know each other? Don't say this in the future. Hearing Zhang Hai's lazy explanation, He Yu thought that she was right and said with a proud face. What? Hearing He Yu's words, Zhang Hai treated it as if she was farting, but Qili raised her eyebrows. She really didn't think that Zhang Hai had such a status in her family. Just as she was about to say something to stand up for Zhang Hai, her hand was grabbed by Zhang Hai. Feeling Zhang Hai's palm, Qili's heart gradually calmed down. She thought much more than Zhang Hai, because she could see that these people had been targeting Zhang Hai for a long time. It was very likely that after Zhang Hai's mother passed away, they treated Zhang Hai like this. Thinking of her past, she seemed to be one of these people. Thinking of this, Qili's hand that was holding Zhang Hai's hand tightened. Sometimes people always unintentionally hurt others, and her really wasn't particularly unintentional. But it doesn't matter if you don't have a chance to go. My husband and I have decided to go on our honeymoon. 35,000 yuan, for an ordinary family, is a lot of money. But for us, it doesn't matter, right, husband? Ignoring Qili's thoughts, He Yu couldn't help but look at Shangming next to her and said with a smile. At this time, Shangming was also looking at Qili. However, it wasn't that kind of thinking. Instead, he was deep in thought, as if he was recalling something. It wasn't until He Yu called out to him that he reacted. However, he didn't have the time to care about his silly girlfriend. Instead, he carefully moved closer to her. Excuse me, are you President Qi of the Qi Group? Shangming asked Qili with great caution. Oh, do we know each other? Because Shangming came with He Yu, Qili originally didn't want to talk to him. However, she didn't expect him to know her. This surprised Qili a little. She didn't have many friends in Bing City, especially low-class people like Shangming. I don't know. Aya, I dare not say that I know you. I have been to your restaurant and bumped into you at the corridor. I was with Chief Zhang and introduced myself once. I think you are a person of high status and have forgotten about me. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Ming, and I own Hong Real Estate. This company has some reputation in Bing City, but it cannot be compared to your Qi group. Upon hearing Qi Li's words, Ming immediately turned into his lackey mode and knelt down with a smirk on his face. After hearing his words, He Yu, He Rue, and Dong Jian, who was next to him, were all stunned. This was different from what they had said just now. They were going to ridicule Jiang Hai. What was going on? The three of them looked at each other and then looked at Ming. Did this guy make a mistake? What the hell was this? President Qi? However, at this time, another exclamation came from the side. They turned around and saw He Xia and her family. Chapter 668. The person who made this sound was none other than He Xia's husband, Qian Fei. This guy was actually not a good person. This could be seen from the fact that he was walking alone in front while He Xia was carrying a bag and carrying a child behind him. However, when she saw Jiang Hai arrive, He Xia still smiled and nodded to Jiang Hai. Then, she carried the child and walked over. As for Qian Fei, he had already squeezed Ming to the side and looked at Qi Li with a fawning expression. President Qi, why are you here? I really didn't know that your arrival really brought glory to our canopy. Looking at Qi Li, Qian Fei said with a smile. Hearing his words, Qi Li just smiled and nodded. Then, she looked at He Xia and her son. Come nephew, come to auntie. Looking at He Xia's son in front of her, Qi Li said with a smile. Yes, go and let President Qi hug him. President Qi, this is my son. Seeing that Qi Li ignored him, Qian Fei didn't care and still said with a smile. His fawning mode was not ordinary. Hey, little handsome, do you recognize me? Hearing his father's words, He Xia's son, who was still a little afraid, couldn't help but hide back. However, Qi Li took a step forward and looked at He Xia's son with a smile. Yes, I recognize you. Looking at his parents, He Xia's son whispered. When Qian Fei wanted to go forward to speak, he was pulled by He Yu. At the same time, she pulled Ming, who was about to go over and fawn. Old Shang brother-in-law, what's the matter with you two? What are you doing? Aren't we here to expose Jiang Hai? What are you two doing? Looking at the two people in front of her, He Yu was really angry. This was simply a slap in her face. She has something to do with Jiang Hai? Hearing He Yu's words, Qian Fei, who came in later, didn't quite understand the situation. He glanced at them in confusion and didn't say anything. He just sat there and watched Qi Li and He Xia's son play with Jiang Hai with a smile. She's Jiang Hai's wife. She's born with a foxy appearance. Just like Jiang Hai, she's obviously not a good person. She's even wearing branded goods from street stalls. She still has the nerve to wear them out. Hearing Qian Fei's words, He Yu couldn't help but feel a little angry. What do you know? This is CEO Qi. Let Ming tell you. CEO Qi, my son is quite smart, right? Haha, I really didn't think that CEO Qi and my son would be so fated. I didn't even know that CEO Qi was Little Hai's wife. Then I'm quite embarrassed to call myself brother-in-law. Come son, call aunt. Hearing He Yu's words, Qian Fei couldn't help but glare at her. Then, he turned on his lackey mode again and walked over with a smile on his face. If it weren't for his ears, he probably would have grinned. What's going on? Qian Fei could ignore He Yu, but Ming couldn't. Therefore, He Yu grabbed Ming, who also wanted to kneel and lick her feet, and said angrily. This was completely different from her original script. Your cousin may not be as simple as you think. CEO Qi's name is Qi Li. She's the general manager of Qi's group. It can be said that Qi's group belongs to her family. Because the chairman is her mother, this company has a close relationship with the imperial court. Its total assets are tens of billions. In other words, the woman in front of you has a net worth of more than 10 billion. Compared to her, I'm just a small insect. So if you don't want me to go bankrupt, you'd better be careful with your words. Hearing He Yu's words, Ming immediately explained in a low voice. Hearing Ming's words, He Yu's first reaction was confusion. Her second reaction was that it was impossible. Her third reaction was that they must have mistaken her for someone else. Jiang Hai. It could be said that they grew up together. They knew better than anyone else what kind of life he had. How could such a poor loser one day be able to hook up with such a fair, rich, and beautiful woman? No matter whether others believed it or not, he didn't believe it. Even if this fair, rich, and beautiful woman was tired of playing outside and her body was damaged, it was absolutely impossible for her to let Zhang Hai take advantage of her. Therefore, after hearing Xiang Ming's words, he didn't understand. She couldn't understand what was going on at all. In fact, now not only He but also He Rue and her boyfriend, Dong Jian, were confused. They looked at Zhang Hai with disbelief. Although it was Qi Li's net worth of 10 billion, Zhang Hai was Qi Li's husband. No matter how poor he was, it was absolutely impossible for him to lack money. Especially Dong Jian. What did he say just now? Going to work in his company with a basic salary of 3,000 yuan? Damn, he believed that if Zhang Hai was willing, he could even open such a company by himself. Did he say something wrong just now? Yes, he was very sure himself. Zhang Hai is not like what you think. You should have gone the day before yesterday. Zhang Hai's current strength is far beyond what you can imagine. His home is in Boston, and he has adopted 2 foreign girls. According to what I said when I chatted with them, Zhang Hai does indeed raise cattle in Boston. However, his manor is worth $280 million. They didn't say how much he earns in a year, but looking at them, it's definitely not a small amount. Most importantly, between Zhang Hai and Qi Li, Zhang Hai is the dominant one. You know what this means, right? Looking at her younger sister's confused look, He Xia inched closer and whispered to her. Hearing He Xia's words, He Yu and He Rue's expressions became even worse. The 2 girls glanced at Zhang Hai. To be honest, they were in a very bad mood now that a person they had always looked down on suddenly sat on top of them. They were used to being arrogant. Although they were snobbish, they really couldn't bring themselves to look for Zhang Hai. So they turned their heads and left first. He Rue thought for a moment and remembered her face just now. If she were Zhang Hai, she wouldn't forgive herself, so she also turned and left. As for Dong Jian, although he also wanted to curry favor with Zhang Hai, he had nothing to say since He Rue wasn't there. And in his opinion, in fact, he seemed to be the one who offended Zhang Hai the most. A basic salary of 3,000 yuan. Sigh, wasn't this a slap to Zhang Hai's face? So he also left with his tail between his legs. As for Qi Li, after playing with He Xia's children for a while, she also sat next to Zhang Hai. She clearly told Xiang Ming and Qian Fei that they needed to be quiet, so the 2 had to leave. Soon, everyone who came knew that Zhang Hai was now successful. He found a boss with a net worth of 10 billion yuan to be his wife. Even Zhang Hai's uncles and aunts were alarmed. Zhang Hai's first uncle He Weihua, second uncle He Weiya, uncle He Weian, and Aunt He Jelly all asked their families to come and chat with Zhang Hai. Xiang Ming, Qian Fei, and Qi Li could ignore them, but Zhang Hai's immediate relatives really couldn't say anything. They could only deal with it with a smile. Their children also came to talk to Qi Li. Some even directly asked for her phone number. Facing such a situation, Qi Li looked at Zhang Hai helplessly. Zhang Hai could only shrug his shoulders and express that he couldn't help. Originally, he didn't want to let Qi Li come. Qi Li insisted on coming, so he couldn't be blamed. Before the banquet started, Zhang Hai's table was the most lively. After the banquet started, it was even more lively. Everyone wanted to sit at this table. Because of this, they almost quarreled. In the end, when they saw that Qi Li was a little unhappy, they restrained themselves. However, the theme of the banquet was completely messed up. Originally, it was to celebrate Zhang Hai's uncle's 60th birthday. But now, the main character had become Qi Li. In this regard, Qi Li could only laugh. After lunch, Zhang Hai's uncle originally invited Zhang Hai and Qi Li to stay and eat at his house in the evening. However, Zhang Hai didn't agree. He could see that Qi Li already regretted coming here. So, he said that he had something to do and then left. After walking out of the restaurant, Zhang Hai looked at Qi Li, who was a little tired. He couldn't help but hug her shoulder and smile. You must be tired. Looking at Qi Li, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Qi Li felt Zhang Hai's hand and also leaned on Zhang Hai's shoulder. Yeah, this is the first time I've dealt with something like this. In the past, I went to those social gatherings whenever I wanted to, and I didn't go if I didn't want to. No one would give me a hard time, so I still had to accept it. Coming to you today has really been a training exercise. Rubbing her stiff face, Xueqi said helplessly. Her starting point was too high. Her first job was the general manager of the Lose Group. When her connections and money accumulated to a certain extent, even if she was a woman, no one would dare to show off to her. It was completely impossible for her to encounter the things that ordinary female employees encountered in the workplace. Seeing that Xueqi was a little tired, Zhang Hai also tightened his arms. He didn't know how he felt about the woman in his arms at this time. Was it the initial gratitude, excitement, love, family, friendship, or the initial hatred? Or was it guilt? Zhang Hai was a little confused. He really didn't know what to say to Xueqi now. After all, the relationship between them was not so pure. In the afternoon, Zhang Hai took Xueqi back to his home. After playing with Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunchen, Daliana, Marian, and Azalina at home, Xueqi spent the night at Zhang Hai's house for the first time, but unfortunately, Zhang Hai lived on the sofa. The next morning, the first to leave was Xueqi because she had to go back to work. The second to leave was Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen. Zhang Hai also asked them if they had made up their minds to go to Boston with Zhang Hai, but the two women seemed to have made up their minds at this time. They would go but not now. They would wait until next year. Zhang Hai could wait, so it didn't matter. After they left, Bernice and Little Ye, oh no, now they should be called Qi Jie and Zhao Ye, joined Zhang Hai's house because they were preparing to return to Winthrop with Zhang Hai. After Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen left, Zhang Hai and the others also prepared to leave. On February 29 this year, Zhang Hai and the others stayed at home for 2 days. On March 2nd, they boarded a plane to the imperial capital. They were going to go from the imperial capital to New York, and then from New York to Boston. There was no other way. There were only a few domestic flights to the United States, so Zhang Hai and the others had to be in such a hurry. As they entered March, everything was different. Although Boston was definitely the northernmost area in the United States, except for Alaska, its latitude was about the same as the imperial capital. In March, the imperial capital was already in full bloom, and so was Boston. After getting off the plane, Robbins Garcia and the others drove over to pick up Zhang Hai and the others. On the way from New York to Boston, Zhang Hai could see that the snow had basically melted. After all, after entering March, the average daily temperature could reach about 8 degrees. Even on the coldest night, which was around 0 degrees Celsius, it was difficult for snow to stubbornly grow on the ground. With the nourishment of this layer of snow, this year's new grass was also growing healthily. The trees were sprouting new buds, the grass was growing new heads, and although the flowers had not bloomed, they were still budding. Looking at the scene in front of him, Zhang Hai's desire to return to the manor was even more urgent. However, before returning to Winthrop, Zhang Hai and the others still had to make a detour to Boston. Because Zhang Hai received news that his precious shield had been repaired, and after hearing that the car had been repaired, Qi Jia, also known as Bernice, still remembered that Zhang Hai said that he would buy her a car, so she urged Zhang Hai to buy a car first. The exhaustion of sitting on a plane for more than 10 hours disappeared in an instant in front of a car. Zhang Hai didn't care about this. Anyway, he was buying a car. His speed of buying a car was quite fast. If he fancied a car, he would buy it directly. There was no other way. How did things this way? Since it had been decided, Zhang Hai didn't say anything. After speaking to Robbins Garcia, the two F-750 that came to pick them up turned the steering wheel, got off the highway, and drove toward the city of Boston. It seemed that the two cars when they came out could almost pull a motorcade when they went back. Based on their understanding of Zhang Hai, as long as this guy went to the car dealership, he was destined to not return empty-handed. Was it really just to buy a car for Bernice? If Zhang Hai took a fancy to something he liked, it would be strange if he didn't buy it. For their boss, Zhang Hai, Robbins Garcia and the others had already figured out his routine. He was quite willing to spend money in this regard, but it didn't matter. They knew that Zhang Hai had this spare money. This was only the income of last year. Not to mention buying a car, even buying a passenger plane was possible. Not to mention that their fishing farm was about to start selling. Chapter 669. Hello, Mr. Zhang. We have already prepared your car for you. Seeing Zhang Hai and the others walk in, the manager, who had already received the news, walked to Zhang Hai with a smile. The privileges of the rich in the United States really made ordinary people feel quite unbalanced. That's great. In addition to picking up the car today, I also want to see what kind of car I want to buy. Let me see my car first. Hearing the manager's words, this wasn't the first time Zhang Hai dealt with him, so he wasn't polite and smiled. When the manager heard Zhang Hai's instructions, he immediately smiled and led Zhang Hai to the garage next to him. Zhang Hai looked at his former tank and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This bulletproof car was actually destroyed by a deer. Who would believe it if he told others? But this was really the truth. When the deer rushed, coupled with the original strength of the car, it could really insert the antlers into his engine. This was something that couldn't be helped. Now looking at the brand new car in front of him, Zhang Hai patted the car door with satisfaction and then nodded to the manager. He was quite satisfied with the car's repair. It was basically like a new car, but it still had the unique taste of Zhang Hai. Okay, this car is well repaired. I will drive this car directly in a while. I want to buy a car. Let's go and pick one. Patting the front cover of his beloved car, Zhang Hai said happily. At the same time, he looked at Xueqi. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the manager naturally smiled and led everyone to the distant exhibition hall. He knew that there would be business to do when Zhang Hai came. However, just as everyone walked out of the garage and was about to go to the exhibition hall, in an instant, a car quickly drove in front of them. When they saw the car, Zhang Hai and the others didn't care at first. When the car drove straight toward them, they panicked a little, especially when the sharp-eyed Zhang Hai found that there was no driver in the car. Who the F***CK? This car doesn't have a driver. Get out of the way. Looking at the approaching car, Zhang Hai couldn't help but yell. Upon hearing Zhang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia and Philemon Turner, who had been driving over, immediately jumped to the side. Xueqi's reaction was not slow either. She immediately pulled her sister to the side. Although Delina and Marion were scared out of their wits, fortunately, Azalina also dodged to the side. Seeing that there was no one else behind him, Zhang Hai also dodged instantly. Just as they were about to watch the car crash into the garage in the distance, the car began to slow down in front of Zhang Hai and the others. It even stopped directly in front of Zhang Hai and the others. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai and the others were stunned. They looked at each other with some doubts. As for the manager, he was also scared just now. The speed of the car was about 10 miles per hour. If it really hit someone, although it was not fatal, if something happened, it would be his responsibility. Zhang Hai and the others were all pampered. Fortunately, nothing happened. Seeing the car stop, the manager immediately walked to the door with a gloomy face. Originally, he thought that it was a child who drove the car and couldn't see the situation in front, so it went on a rampage. But when he walked to the side of the car, he was shocked because there was no one in the car at this time. What the hell? Feeling the warm sun shining on his body, the manager felt a chill in his heart. The temperature of the sun was obviously not enough to dispel the panic in his heart. He couldn't help but look at Zhang Hai and the others. And when he looked, Zhang Hai and the others were also a little panicked because Zhang Hai also saw this scene. If there was no one driving, it was understandable that the car slipped away because the handbrake was not pulled, but what the hell was the car stopping just now? I feel like I shouldn't buy it from you. After thinking about it, Zhang Hai still felt that it was better for him to run away first. It was better to believe in these things than not. Most importantly, Zhang Hai himself was also a member of the supernatural. Okay. To be honest, when he heard Zhang Hai's words, the manager smiled reluctantly. After all, he didn't want to lose this customer. But the problem now was that he couldn't explain what was going on. It was too scary. Zhang Hai wanted to run away, but he was willing. Manager, there was no accident just now, right? However, just as the manager was about to send Zhang Hai and the others away, an employee of the car shop hurriedly ran over. Seeing that everyone was fine, he breathed a sigh of relief. What's the matter? Let's talk about it later. This car. Let's leave it here first. What the hell? Looking at the employee who came over, the manager couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the car in front of him, he couldn't help but whisper. Hey boss, this is not a ghost. This is an autopilot function. Hearing the manager's words, the employee here couldn't help but laugh and say. Autopilot? Hearing his words, Zhang Hai, who was about to run away, couldn't help but stop temporarily. What does this mean? This car is an all-electric car. It's a new product of Tesla. It has a system similar to our mobile phones. It can bind the user. This is the newly developed summoning function, just like this. Although the employee didn't know Zhang Hai and the others, he knew that the guests accompanied by the manager must be big customers. He also saw that Zhang Hai and the others were scared just now. He also had the responsibility to solve the riddle. Then he took out his mobile phone and trotted to the distance. Then he gave an order. The car that had been stationary started again, and there was a woman's voice in the car, using the map to determine the route. Then, a magical scene happened. Just in front of Zhang Hai and the others, the car suddenly started and drove towards the employee. Moreover, the car stopped precisely in front of the employee. It didn't touch any other cars or deviate from the route at all. Hey! This is interesting. Watching the employee drive the car back, Zhang Hai touched his chin and looked at the car in front of him. He couldn't help but be curious. Come, Emile, introduce it to Mr. Zhang. Seeing that Zhang Hai was a little curious about the car, he also knew that the car could drive on its own. It was not haunted like he thought. At that moment, the soul of the businessman was officially awakened, and he said to his employee. After listening to his words, his staff also followed Zhang Hai's lead and introduced him. Tesla was a representative of alternative energy vehicles. It was an American industry, headquartered in California.
It was considered a high-tech company, and it could be said that it was an inventor in the field of black technology cars.
Recently, the all-electric car was still very popular around the world.
Not only was it popular with the government, after all, the pollution of oil in the atmosphere had been reduced a lot, but its design was also very beautiful.
However, it was not without its shortcomings. The shortcoming was that it didn't run fast. In the words of an experienced driver, it was not very exciting.
But recently, this car was quite popular in Europe, because electric cars in Europe could enjoy subsidies from the government, so this car was very popular in Europe. It was also sold in China, but there were not many of them.
Zhang Hai had heard of all-electric cars before, but this was the first time he had seen one. This car not only has the function of self-parking, self-driving and summoning, but it can also be locked to the user, and it can be started without a key. Seeing that Zhang Hai was really interested in this car, the employee began to introduce it to him. This car was like a more complicated mobile phone system, but to be honest, it was quite impressive at first glance. And most importantly, the car model was not ugly, and the variety was not bad. At present, Tesla cars were definitely not available in large cars. But residential cars were still very good, and there were a total of 3 models. The S model was an ordinary car, and its target was the BMW 5 Series. Its price was about the same, the cheapest was $600,000, and the most expensive was over $1 million. Of course, this was referring to RMB.
In the United States, the cheapest car was about $60,000, and the most expensive car was $120,000. This car was cheap and expensive mainly because of its engine, which could also be called a generator. Other engines had the same number of cylinders and horsepower, but this thing depended on the kilowatt-hour. The cheapest was 60 kilowatt-hours, and the most expensive was 90 kilowatt-hours. But the disadvantages were obvious. First, it was not convenient to charge. A full charge could run more than 500 kilometers, but charging it from zero would take more than 10 hours. Fast charging would damage the battery, and it would take 4.5 hours. When other cars ran out of gas, they would go to the gas station to refuel. Even if they went to the gas station, it would take them half an hour to refuel. But this car needed more than 4 hours to charge, so it was destined that this car was not suitable to be driven too far away. In theory, the speed of the car was 250 kilometers per hour, but in fact, the fastest speed was 140 kilometers per hour.
In China, this car was sold for more than $1 million, but it could only reach 100 kilometers per hour. It was indeed a bit of a loss, but it was very cool to use this black technology. So Zhang Hai looked at this car, and to be honest, he was very tempted.
When he thought about how he would act cool in the future, he could say something to his phone when he walked out of the restaurant, and then the car would automatically drive to his side.
Thinking about it, it was still very exciting. Furthermore, the choice of this car was not small. In addition to the S-Series, there was also the X-Series, which was an SUV, and the Roadster, which was a sports car. The X series was slightly more expensive than the S series, but the Roadster was more expensive. The cheapest one cost at least $90,000. The most expensive one was nearly $200,000. But Zhang Hai really didn't lack money. Glancing at Qi Jie and the other's shining eyes, Zhang Hai decided to buy a car. Not a car, but a car, an SUV, and a sports car. He didn't lack money anyway. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, the manager and the staff here were very happy. This business was finally done. Zhang Hai always focused on buying cars, and it was really convenient to buy a car in the United States. In the car shops here, all kinds of procedures could be done. It could be said that they could directly buy a car with money and drive it on the road. It was that simple. After everything was done, Zhang Hai drove one car, Azalina drove another, and Qi Jie drove another. A group of 6 cars drove to the manor in a mighty manner. On the contrary, Zhang Hai's previous favorite, the battle shield, was ignored at this time. It was driven back by the other party's staff. However, Zhang Hai couldn't help it. This car was fine to drive around here. If they went out of town, he had to drive his war shield. When they returned to the manor, Zhang Hai found that the outer wall that was originally damaged by the impact of the deer herd had been repaired at this time. After knowing that Zhang Hai and the others had returned, Aphrodite and the others had already prepared food and waited for Zhang Hai at home for a long time. Naturally, Robbins Garcia and the others wouldn't be third wheels. After they left, Zhang Hai and the others happily gathered together. Originally, after Zhang Hai left, the villa had been very quiet. Even Aphrodite and the others felt that something was missing. This time, when Zhang Hai came back, they were the most excited. After all, Zhang Hai hadn't been away for so long in the past. That night, Qi Jie and Chia went to sleep first. Firstly, it was because they were too tired. Secondly, it was because they wanted to let Aphrodite and the others have a good night with Zhang Hai. That night, the lights in Zhang Hai's room almost didn't go out. It wasn't until the next morning that the lights went out. Then, in the afternoon, Zhang Hai and the others came out of the room. It was obvious what they were doing that night. Aphrodite and the others also used the body mixing technique to curry favor with Zhang Hai. For them, the meaning of their existence was to curry favor with Zhang Hai. They didn't want to be the key people by Zhang Hai's side, but they wanted to be an existence that Zhang Hai could vent his anger on. As long as they could stay here, that was enough. At least for them it was enough. It was said that a woman's home was a hero's grave. Zhang Hai wasn't a hero, so he stayed in a woman's home quite well. For 3 days in a row, Zhang Hai and the others stayed in the villa and made out with each other. Later, even Qi Jie and Qi joined in. The only people in the villa who didn't have that kind of relationship with Zhang Hai were Delina, Marian, and Azalina, who had long had feelings for Zhang Hai. Naturally, they were much bolder in the villa. In this way, the first few days of March flew by. As the temperature rose day by day, one of Winthrop's annual grand festivals was put on the agenda. Yes, the Poseidon Festival. After the Poseidon Festival, it meant that the Poseidon Festival was worship to the Poseidon, and they could go into the sea to catch fish. Unknowingly, Zhang Hai had been raising fish for a year, and it was time to harvest. Chapter 670. Yo, what wind blew Uncle Wallace here? Hurry up and sit inside. Looking at the car slowly stopping in front of his manor, Zhang Hai said with a smile, but at this time, his parking lot can't be parked because there is a construction team working here. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also glared at him, then parked the car in the distance, opened the door and walked over. Have you been busy recently? Looking at Zhang Hai, Mayor Wallace asked him with a smile, at the same time looking at the construction team in front of him. It's okay, my main job is to look after it. There's no other way. Now I'm the only idle person in the manor. Shrugging, Zhang Hai said to Mayor Wallace. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Indeed, leisure time will always pass, and now the manor has begun to get busy. Since entering March, Zhang Hai's manor has basically been in a rhythm of foot hitting the back of the head. First of all, in March, the snow melted, and Zhang Hai said that he wants to build a parking lot and a greenhouse. The greenhouse is easy to build, this thing is built quickly, but building this parking lot and the road passage is an out-and-out big project. There are 2 roads to build, one from Zhang Hai's villa to the dock,
half of the road in the middle to the airport, and of course, to the cowshed. The other road needs to be built along the river to block the streetlights. Just these 2 roads will be very troublesome. Zhang Hai is not distressed about the money, he doesn't care about the money, but this time is really a lot, and it will take almost a month to finish. Second, the flowers are blooming in spring, Zhang Hai and the others should be planting, and a new round of cultivation will start in the vineyard. In this way, Aphrodite and the others almost grew up in the vineyard, and they didn't come to Zhang Hai's manor recently. Qi Jie and Qi Ya began to plant vegetables with Delina and Marian. Because many women in this manor have gone to the seaside villa, the heavy responsibility of planting vegetables was handed over to them. Of course, in the evening and in the morning, they will also come to plant vegetables. In fact, they are the main force, and Qi Ya and the others are more just watching or watering. But this also needed someone to keep an eye on it. Azalina and Conrad, the 2 bodyguards, weren't idle, they went to gather grass. Don't forget, Zhang Hai and Du Feimin still had a business deal to do. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if they had the time to do it. Everyone has something to do, and only Zhang Hai is idle, so he came to supervise the work. The greenhouse can be built in a few days. It is simple, after all, Zhang Hai doesn't plan to build a big one, but the parking lot and the 2 roads are very time-consuming. In addition, Zhang Hai made the best. The bottom is made of steel, the pillars are made of cement and reinforced stone, and the roof is made of alloy, making the whole road very sturdy. According to the person who took over this project, not to mention just snow, rain or tornadoes, it is absolutely impossible to cause any damage to the parking lot. If there was a problem within 5 years, he wouldn't ask for money and would make it up for free. Originally, he was only supposed to look at 3 years, but he dared to say 5 years. Zhang Hai also believed him. He also didn't have the habit of talking about money and directly started to work. Unknowingly, 3 days have passed, the parking lot is gradually taking shape. This is a good thing. Originally, you are busy here, I shouldn't have come to ask, but you are now the backbone of this place, I feel that it is better to ask. Will you participate in this year's Poseidon Festival? Seeing that Zhang Hai is busy, Mayor Wallace hesitated, but still decided to ask Zhang Hai. After all, this matter is not related to Zhang Hai, it is related to the situation of the town. Poseidon Festival? Hearing this, Zhang Hai's mind couldn't help but drift back to last year, the day after he killed the mountain lion for the first time last year. It seems to be the town's Poseidon Festival, but because he is not very familiar with the people in the town at that time, he only went to participate in the parade. But at that time, he also copied a lot of good things, such as the treasure map of the shipwrecks. Those are absolute night weeds. But this year he is not going to go to the shipwrecks at sea. He has a lot of things to do this year: fishing at the end of March, tea harvesting at the beginning of April, attending the New York Beef Show in the middle of April. Booning will go to France to participate in the Magaun wine competition at the end of the month, the Brussels International Wine Competition in May. The situation in June depends on the situation, but it is just summer. It is not a good time to go out to sea. In the summer, the storms at sea were very strong, so they had to avoid June. In July, they had to harvest lobsters, and in August, they had to harvest tuna. Of course, they could also go fishing. In late August, they would harvest grapes, and in September, they would harvest grapes to make wine. In October, it would be winter again, and the year would pass. So although Zhang Hai usually looked like a sloppy person, his schedule was actually very full. The train runs fast because every carriage has a power unit. It is not a bullet train, it is a train. If you want to run fast, you have to rely on the engine. Although Zhang Hai doesn't do anything, he is the engine in this manner, there is no doubt about it. He doesn't have to do anything, but he has to be here. Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, this Poseidon Festival doesn't seem to be like last year, where it is just a parade. Zhang Hai doesn't know what to do. After thinking about it, he thinks it is better to ask first. Is this something that I must participate in? You know, I don't know much about this. Scratching his head, Zhang Hai asked Mayor Wallace. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also explained to Zhang Hai. Just like what Robbins Garcia and Zhang Hai said last year, the Poseidon Festival is actually a superstition. Pray, hope that the fish will be abundant, and the wind will be calm, and so on. Last year, Zhang Hai didn't fish. He only went into the sea to catch some fish, so it didn't matter. However, if he wants to fish this year, it might not be good if he doesn't participate in the Poseidon Festival. Therefore, Zhang Hai thought for a while and called Edward Anderson first. Sure enough, it was just as Zhang Hai thought. They want to fish this year, so they must participate in the Poseidon Festival. After receiving the news, Zhang Hai also looked at Mayor Wallace. Uncle Wallace, we are going to participate. Tell us what you need us to do. Is it money or something? Looking at Mayor Wallace, Zhang Hai said seriously. Although he didn't believe in these things, sometimes these habits still had to be respected. Besides, since Edward Anderson said that he must participate, Zhang Hai wouldn't embarrass his second-in-command. I don't need you to pay, but after all, your status is different now. So if you want to participate, you can't just follow the crowd like last year. This year, I'm going to let you hold the Poseidon's gift. Hearing that Zhang Hai was going to participate, Mayor Wallace also nodded in satisfaction. Then he said the purpose of his visit. You want me to hold it? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Zhang Hai was stunned. Zhang Hai knew very well what the Poseidon's gift was. Last year he saw it. It was the Poseidon slug of the Atlantic Ocean. But last year, he took the initiative to help, but Mayor Wallace didn't let him touch it. According to Mayor Wallace's words, only the mayor could hold the Poseidon's gift. But what does this mean this year? Seeing the doubt in Zhang Hai's eyes, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh and explain to Zhang Hai. Every year, there are only 3 possibilities for the person holding the sea god's gift. The first is an elder that everyone trusts, the second is a noble divine envoy, and the third is a hero. As for me, although it's a bit embarrassing to say this, as the mayor of this town, I'm still a trustworthy elder. Among us, there are no divine envoys, nor were there any heroes before, but it's different now. Seeing the doubt in Zhang Hai's eyes, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh and explain to Zhang Hai. How is it different? Hearing these 3 names, Zhang Hai tried to compare them, but it seemed that he couldn't match any of them. I'm definitely not an elder. This is fixed. Secondly, I shouldn't be a brave person. This is also fixed. Thirdly, it's even more impossible for me to be an oracle. If I say that I'm from the East, it would make sense. After all, I have a dragon tattoo on my body. But this is the United States. The dragons in the United States are big lizards with wings. What kind of oracle am I? So after hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Zhang Hai was even more confused. How can I hold this thing? Because you are an angel who brings the residents of the town to a better life, so you are also considered an oracle. Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his explanation, Zhang Hai instantly became Spartan. If I'm considered an oracle like this. Hee. He seemed to see him wearing a priest's outfit and then saying to the beautiful nun kneeling in front of him, Come, child of the Lord, this is the trumpet of heaven. Please put it in your mouth affectionately. Can I? I'll just fork out the money and follow you, just like last year. After hesitating, Zhang Hai said to Mayor Wallace. He was really a person who was afraid of trouble, and now it seemed that it was really troublesome. Haha, don't worry, it won't take up too much of your time. It's only 2 days. When the time comes, I will come to you in advance. The first day is a walk, and the second day is the ceremony. Just do as I say. Hearing Zhang Hai's obvious excuses, Mayor Wallace shook his head. Zhang Hai finally agreed. He wouldn't easily stop Zhang Hai from doing it, so he patted Zhang Hai's shoulder and this matter was settled. Then, while Zhang Hai was a little depressed, he drove away happily. However, Zhang Hai waited until evening and told everyone about this matter. Originally, he thought that because this would delay the construction period, everyone would object. But unexpectedly, Robbins Garcia and the others were extremely excited because in their view, the annual Poseidon Festival was extremely sacred. It was like the torchbearers of the Olympic Games. In some people's eyes, it was a thankless task. Anyway, they didn't want to watch the Olympic Games and didn't pay attention to it. They would rather sleep at home or do their own things if they had the time. But in some people's eyes, it was a supreme honor. Being responsible for holding the gift of Poseidon during the Poseidon Festival was a supreme honor, at least in Winthrop. Edward Anderson and the others would never be able to touch the fish tank in their lifetime. The fish tank represented the supreme honor of Winthrop. Edward Anderson remembered that when he was young, he had a friend who was curious about the gift of Poseidon. He sneaked into the room where the gift of Poseidon was kept at night and accidentally broke the fish tank. Later, he was directly expelled from the town. Since then, Edward Anderson had never seen him again. This showed how important this position was in the eyes of the people of Winthrop. Now, Zhang Hai was going to hold the fish tank. In their eyes, this wasn't a fish tank. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was the Holy Grail. Don't worry, boss. I'll call my wife over to help you look after the construction. There will definitely be no problems. You must practice well. Looking at Zhang Hai eagerly and admiringly, Philemon Turner said with a serious face. He didn't even hesitate to ask his wife to take leave and come back to look after it. Hearing Philemon's words, the other people of Winthrop nodded enthusiastically. They couldn't be careless about this matter. Looking at their fanatical looks, Zhang Hai didn't know what to say for a while. In the end, he could only smile a little awkwardly. At the same time, he was also a little curious about the mission he had to complete. Time passed day by day. Du Feynman had already sent people over to collect the first batch of fodder. The greenhouse was also completely built and ready for use. After the seedlings were planted, the fertile land allowed the seedlings that had frozen to death in the winter to grow sturdily. The weather had also reached about 10 degrees, and the annual Sea God Festival began again at this time. The day before, Zhang Hai left home and was busy from morning to night. He walked the route between the town and the seaside no less than 20 times. After remembering all the requirements clearly, he had to endure Mayor Wallace's constant nagging. Fortunately, the Sea God ceremony began on the second day after the most nagging day had passed. Chapter 671. There was no exact time for the Poseidon Festival. Last year, the Poseidon Festival was held in early summer, but this year, it was held in early spring. There was also a meaning behind this because when it was held, the things that were sought were also different. Last year, the festival was held in summer, and the festival was only for peace and tranquility. Because there were no more fish in Winthrop at that time, there was no need to go out to sea. Therefore, the festival was held in summer, and there were no storms or anything like that. But this year was different. There were tourists this year. Even if there were fewer fish in the sea, they still had to bring the tourists out to play. This was also considered to be a source of income. Therefore, since the new year, the town had already decided that the Poseidon Festival would be held in March, just in time for the fishing season. Early in the morning, all the residents of the town who were still free gathered in the town. In the town square, Mayor Wallace gave the order, and the Poseidon Festival began. Zhang Hai also cooperated and lifted the huge fish tank. In an instant, everyone started to shout. They had to admit that it was really quite impressive. Then the person in charge of the music in front led the way, and the crowd set off. The group of people walked towards the seaside in a mighty manner. The most dazzling person in the crowd was Zhang Hai, who was holding the fish tank. He had to admit that it was an honor. However, it was actually quite tiring. The fish tank was not small, and could hold about 10 kilograms of water. In addition to the weight of the tank, it weighed about 25 kilograms. Although it didn't seem like much, it was impossible to not be tiring to carry it all the way to the seaside. When Mayor Wallace held the fish tank, he could even change his posture or something. This was also the privilege of being an old man. However, Zhang Hai was young and strong, so he was too embarrassed to change his posture or something like that. Therefore, he kept holding the fish tank. Unlike yesterday's rehearsal, there were a lot of people today, and naturally they walked very slowly. Fortunately, there were no other programs. After walking for more than 2 hours, Zhang Hai and the others walked from the town to the seaside. Along the way, not only did they attract a large number of townspeople, but there were also many tourists who were very interested in the parade. They took videos along the way and followed the parade. They were also very interested in the Atlantic blue dragon that Zhang Hai was hugging. Unfortunately, the townspeople didn't allow them to get too close. Although most of the tourists were ordinary people and kind-hearted people, there were still some who liked to cause trouble. If the blue dragon and the fish tank were damaged, it would be meaningless to chase him out. Therefore, the best way was to prevent tourists from getting close. Just let them watch from afar. However, this also made the tourists very curious. Along the way, there were more and more people. Fortunately, Zhang Hai's hard days would come to an end one day. After walking for more than 2 hours, he finally arrived at the seaside. After Mayor Wallace finished his prayer, Zhang Hai put the fish tank into the sea. After watching the blue dragon in the fish tank swim into the sea and disappear completely, he raised the empty fish tank. Then, the townspeople shouted loudly. This meant that the sea god had received their gift. At this time, the sea god ceremony was officially over. After Zhang Hai handed the fish tank to the townspeople, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Then, he walked to a tent at the side to rest. This tent was specially prepared for him yesterday. It was to prevent him from not having a place to rest when he was tired. It used to belong to Mayor Wallace, but now it belonged to Zhang Hai. The tent itself wasn't small. Not to mention sitting, it could even fit 2 or 3 people lying down. Because Mayor Wallace used to hold meetings here in the past, the tent was very sturdy and of good quality. As long as the zipper was pulled up, the people inside could see the situation outside. However, the people outside couldn't see the situation inside. How are you? Are you tired? Today was the sea god ceremony, so Robbins Garcia and Edward Anderson had other things to do, so they couldn't come. However, Chi Jie and the others still came to watch the fun. When they saw Zhang Hai sitting inside the tent, they couldn't help but smile and walk over. Looking at them, Zhang Hai moved his arms and said with a smile, "Phew, I'm fine. It's just that my arms are a little sore." Originally, Zhang Hai wanted them to massage his arms. However, it was obvious that they didn't hear or deliberately missed the second half of Zhang Hai's sentence. Instead, they laughed and played together. "Well, if you're tired, take a rest. Let's go to the market over there." After ignoring Zhang Hai, Chi Jie said with a smile, and went to the market over there with Chi Ya, Delina, and Marian. Of course, as Alina was always by their side. Otherwise, Zhang Hai would be worried. Originally, Zhang Hai also wanted to go to the market to take a look, but now that he was indeed a little tired, he was ready to take a rest. However, before he could lie down, another set of footsteps came from afar. "Hi, Zhang." Upon hearing this voice, Zhang Hai turned around and took a look. A trace of embarrassment flashed across his face, but he quickly concealed it. Then, he smiled unnaturally because looking at the woman in front of him, he knew that Zhang Hai wasn't that easy to deal with. "What's wrong? Don't you recognize me?" Seeing Zhang Hai's somewhat tangled gaze, the girl didn't care. She sat directly next to Zhang Hai, and then smiled at Zhang Hai. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also touched his head. How could he not recognize her? "How is that possible, Kelly? I haven't seen you recently." Yes, the person in front of him was none other than Kelly Solon. When Zhang Hai was in the bathroom on the second floor of Hodge Circe's house, something that shouldn't have happened with her and Delia George. Later, Zhang Hai made it clear to Delia, but he couldn't say anything to Kelly. Delia had a boyfriend. Zhang Hai could use this thing as an excuse, but Kelly didn't. This made Zhang Hai a little overwhelmed. But Kelly didn't seem to care much about this relationship. After that day, although she occasionally sent some text messages to Zhang Hai, they didn't have much contact. Today, her sudden arrival caught Zhang Hai a little off guard. "What else can I do?" "Find a job. My dad asked me to help out at the flower shop, but I feel that I'm still young. If I don't go out and find a job, I'll be sorry for my age." With a shrug, Kelly Solon said somewhat speechlessly. Of course, there was one thing she didn't say. Children in the United States were actually somewhat rebellious. After they turned 18, most of them were unwilling to live with their parents, let alone work for them. Not only would they earn less, but they would also be mistreated. So compared to working at home, they were more willing to go out. This was the main reason why Kelly had been looking for a job. "Well, have you ever thought about continuing to study in school?" Hearing her words, Zhang Hai hesitated and said to her. To be honest, Zhang Hai knew that Kelly Solon was looking for a job at the very beginning, but he didn't want to take this job. But after all, something had happened between the two, and now they were friends, so it didn't matter if he helped her find a job. "Postgraduate entrance exam?" "Hey, Zhang, don't joke around. It's possible for me to take the postgraduate entrance exam, but the problem is that my major is not very good. No research team will want me." With a shrug, Kelly Solon said helplessly. The postgraduate entrance exam in the United States was indeed a good place to go. In fact, it was the same in China, But it was not so easy to take the postgraduate entrance exam in the United States. It wasn't as if you could pass the exam. You needed to participate in some research groups. You had to become a graduate student of those professors so that you could take the exam. In China, this was more of a title, but in Boston, you really needed some research ability.
Leave this to me.
Looking at Kelly Solan's appearance, Zhang Hai smiled. He would help her to the end. Since something had happened between them that shouldn't have happened, then he would help her. Then he took out his mobile phone, found a number on it, and dialed it. After the phone rang a few times, an excited voice came from the phone. "Hey Zhang, you must know that our research has made progress, so you called, right?
Haha, it's really great."
Listening to this person's words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes couldn't help but light up.
Research has made progress? What does this mean?
Wait a minute, Professor Baker Gerard. I don't know what progress your research has made.
Please speak slowly.
Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Zhang Hai couldn't help but speak immediately. He had invested a lot of money in this research institute. If there had been no results, then Zhang Hai would be very helpless. Although this institution was first established not to make money, but to cover for his manor, the effect was still good so far. At least it blocked a lot of scholars and the like. But if this research institute could really research something, it would also be a good benefit for them.
Haha,
I crossbred your cattle with the North American bison applied from Yellowstone Park. I found that there was no reproductive isolation between the two species, and the calf born was not only smarter, but also similar in size to the North American bison, but its personality was more inclined to be like the Angus cattle. However, I still don't know if this kind of cattle is suitable for raising.
Everything needs to be studied first.
Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Professor Baker Gerard couldn't help but speak briskly.
It could be heard that he was in a good mood now.
Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also raised his eyebrows.
A cross between Angus cattle and American bison? It sounds a bit interesting.
But I don't know if this thing can be raised, but I'll leave it to Professor Baker Gerard.
Anyway, he doesn't know much about it.
After congratulating Professor Baker Gerard, he gradually calmed down.
Zhang, what's the matter with you calling me?
Now that Baker Gerard was in a good mood, he also remembered that Zhang Hai didn't call because he knew about his research results. It meant that Zhang Hai was looking for him for something else.
Zhang Hai was his boss.
He had been researching for almost a year, but he didn't get anything, so he was still quite careful with Zhang Hai.
Here's the thing. I have a friend who is a student at your B City University.
Because it's not easy to find a job after graduation, she is preparing to take the postgraduate entrance exam. I just want to ask if you have any postgraduate spots left.
If you do, I'll let her take the exam.
Hearing Baker Gerard's words, Zhang Hai also explained his intentions, but he was still a little careful when he said it. He was also afraid that the old professor would think too much. Generally, such intellectuals had a lot of things to do. It would be troublesome if he thought that Kelly was a spy sent by him. However, Zhang Hai was obviously thinking too much. The Americans didn't pay attention to the saying, "Don't suspect the people you use, don't use the people you suspect." In such a research institution in the United States, there must be at least one or even several investors. This was because they had to watch these people to see if they were spending money recklessly, if they had good patents, and if there were things that were beneficial to the investors.
Who would be like Zhang Hai, who just invested the money and didn't care about it?
Now that Zhang Hai sent someone over, it could be said that Baker Gerard was overjoyed.
Of course, this is no problem. Just let her take the exam.
Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Baker Gerard couldn't help but pat his chest and said. Hearing that he agreed, Zhang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. After making an okay gesture to Kelly Soren next to him, he exchanged a few more words with Baker Gerard and then hung up the phone.
Really? You really helped me find the professor?
Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Kelly Soren couldn't help but say excitedly. Well, Professor Baker Gerard should be the professor of evolutionary chemistry for your college students. Now he is doing a plan for the quality of cattle and grass on the ranch for me. You can go to him these days and discuss with him. Then study hard and pass the exam. Looking at Kelly Soren, Zhang Hai said to her with a smile. Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Kelly Soren couldn't help but rush over excitedly and kissed Zhang Hai heavily on the lips. Originally, when she talked to Zhang Hai about her work,
It was more of a complaint. But she didn't expect that Zhang Hai would actually help her solve this problem. To be honest, this really made her excited. Zhang, I must repay you well. I don't know if you are in the tent by the sea, Kelly said to him with watery eyes. It can be seen that she is really interested in Zhang Hai. Chapter 672. Hey boss, what are you thinking about? Looking at Zhang Hai standing on the bow, Edward Anderson couldn't help but walk out with a pipe. While smoking, he asked Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also turned his head and smiled at him. Oh, nothing, I'm just worried about how much fish there will be in a while. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile and say, Don't worry boss, we will definitely have a bumper harvest this year. Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, Edward Anderson couldn't help but smile, then said with great certainty. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled and continued to look at the sea in the distance. 3 days have passed since the Poseidon ritual. On that day, Zhang Hai and Kelly almost did it in the tent. Cough cough. But unfortunately, it didn't happen in the end because Chia came back to deliver fruits to Zhang Hai. Fortunately, she didn't take off her clothes at that time, otherwise, she would have been caught red-handed. But even so, Chia's suspicious gaze still made Zhang Hai a little speechless. In the evening, Chia deliberately went to Zhang Hai's room and left satisfied after 2 hours. In the following days, Zhang Hai and the others were still busy. But no matter how busy they were, Zhang Hai still had to come for the first fishing trip. Zhang Hai's fishing boat was assembled in Boston. When he first assembled it, he considered the problem of fishing in the future. So Zhang Hai's fishing boat was not small. It braved the wind and waves on the sea, and it was still very stable. Don't worry boss if you are really worried. Come in with me to take a look at the sonar. Although Zhang Hai didn't speak, he still looked a little worried. Edward Anderson suddenly said to Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then, he felt that it would be good to take a look, so he walked into the cabin. At this time, Marin Rupert was driving the boat. In the beginning, he asked him to drive the plane and the boat. This was also what he needed to do. Next to the driver's seat, there was a sonar device. At this time, the screen was constantly jumping. Small dots appeared under the sonar. These small dots represented schools of fish. It can be seen that the fishing resources of Zhang Hai fishery were really not ordinary. We are still in the coral reef area. Let's drive into the sea first. Looking at these small dots, Edward Anderson explained with a smile. In the past, Edward Anderson and the others went out to sea almost every day. In addition to feeding the fish and testing the water quality, they spent thousands of dollars of diesel to pave the way for today's trip. The sonar has the function of capturing and marking. Every time they cruised in the fishing ground, they would mark the fish they encountered and catch them in order. They didn't just find a place to cast the net. The types of fish, the size of the fish, and so on were all knowledge. Zhang Hai naturally didn't understand this. Although he knew that there were a lot of fish in his fishing ground, if he didn't catch them, they wouldn't be his fish. After all, these fish were very smart. It wasn't so easy to catch them. Therefore, Zhang Hai was more or less worried at this time. The boat sailed very fast. Even if Zhang Hai was worried, the fishing boat quickly left the coral reef area and entered the water. With a series of rapid sounds, Edward Anderson and the others were ready to catch the fish. Their first target was the first batch of fish that Zhang Hai ordered last year, the American redfish. When they first bought these fry from Iron Bull, these fry were only as long as an index finger and as thick as 2 fingers. But now, after a year of growth, these fish could be raised to 2 catties in weight and 20 centimeters in length in an ordinary fishing ground. However, it was obvious that Zhang Hai's fishing ground wasn't an ordinary fishing ground. These fish had absorbed Zhang Hai's spirit chi since they were young. Oh no, they were still spirit blood back then. In addition, they ate food that contained spirit chi, so their growth was quite terrifying. In Zhang Hai's eyes, these fish had basically all grown to 2 catties, which was about 4 catties in weight. This could be seen from the sonar. Their individual size was about 30 centimeters long. This year was not the best time to catch the fish in the soaring dragon manner. Raising these fish for 3 years before catching them was actually the right way to go. But rice has to be eaten one bite at a time. First learn how to walk, then learn how to run. There has been no income from the fishery. Although they can rely on the ranch to support them, he always felt that it was not the case. Therefore, Jiang Hai decided to fish this year. After finding these American red fish, Marin Rupert took the helm, Edward Anderson was in charge of the fishing machine, and Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian were in charge of setting the net. After everything was ready, Jiang Hai's fishing boat sailed in front of the school of fish. At Edward Anderson's command, all the fishing nets were cast into the sea. Then, Jiang Hai felt the boat sink and the speed of the boat slowed down instantly. However, no matter how slow it was still faster than the fish swimming. On the sonar display, Jiang Hai saw those small dots enter the fishing net one by one. When almost all the fish were caught in the net, Edward Anderson also started the engine. The turbine pulled the fishing net and began to pull it back. Tommy Charles and the others also opened the entrance of the ice cabin, ready to work at any time. As the fishing net was pulled up, it looked like a big bag. The front was empty, but when the fishing net left the water, Jiang Hai and the others showed joy on their faces. They saw that the empty fishing net had turned into a huge ellipsoid about 6 meters in diameter. It looked like a water droplet, appearing in front of Jiang Hai and the others. When the fishing net was pulled to the entrance of the ice cabin, it opened. In an instant, countless American red fish fell onto the deck like rain. At this moment, the fishermen's work officially began. Because they had to pick the American red fish, they would directly slide into the ice cabin. Some other fish, as well as seaweed, would be thrown back into the sea. Looking at these fish, Jiang Hai was finally relieved. Guys, this is a gift from the sea god to us. Our boss is a man bestowed by the heavens. He gave this sea region countless fish. Looking at the fish on the ground, Edward Anderson stood up in front of the turbine and shouted loudly, "Harvest! Harvest!" Following his cry, Tommy Charles and the others followed suit. With the gradual depletion of the Atlantic fishing industry, they had not seen such a scene for a long time. Usually, when they went out to sea, they would not be able to catch so many fish in one go. With such a big net, it would be unfair if they did not catch at least half of the net's trash. Looking at these fish, to be honest, these fishermen were a little touched. For a moment, tears welled up in their eyes. But soon, they sorted out their thoughts. This was because their work was not done yet. Jiang Hai hired them not to reminisce about the past. What they needed to do was to help Jiang Hai make money. This was the most important thing. As the fish were sent into the ice cabin one by one, and the seaweed and other things were thrown back into the sea, Jiang Hai and the others were relieved. Of course, Jiang Hai had been following along to help. According to the number Edward Anderson saw on the turbine, these fish weighed a total of 5 tons. Of course, after deducting the remaining cinnabar water and other miscellaneous things, the net weight should be about 4 tons. This was already a pretty good harvest. Jiang Hai's net was very large, the kind with a diameter of 10 centimeters. Small fish would be missed instantly. Generally, the finished fish weighed about 2 caddies. If they swam vertically, they could also get through if they were lucky. Only those guys that are more than 30 centimeters long will be caught in the net, and the ones that Jiang Hai caught are basically more than 40 centimeters long. According to Edward Anderson, there were about 3,000 American red fish in this shoal, and Jiang Hai caught about 2,000. The remaining 1,000 fish would grow bigger after a year of growth. Most importantly, they would leave seeds for the fishery. After dealing with these fish, Jiang Hai and the others continued to fish, galloping freely around Jiang Hai's fishery. The sonar fish finder was constantly capturing the fishing targets they had set, and Jiang Hai helped Tommy Charles to organize the fishing nets. After a while, they would throw this guy into the sea. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai's fishing boat had a total of 4 cabins. One was cold, which meant that it was filled with ice. This was used to preserve precious species of fish, such as blue spear or bluefin. The second was cold, which meant that there was no need for ice. The place to put ice was saved. The main purpose was to spray cold air inside, which could keep the fish fresh for a longer time. It was also used to preserve more advanced seafood. The last was the freezer. After being thrown in, the fish would be frozen into ice. It was generally used to preserve ordinary seafood. There was also a water storage room. This room was a separate warehouse. Its main function was to be in the water. When the boat was moving, The seawater would flow in from one end of the room and out from the other. The fish in this room could always be in contact with the seawater and ensure their survival. When Zhang Hai caught the blue spear, he used this trick. This trick was only effective for those extremely precious fish that had to be kept alive. Some people would say that the reason why these fish could survive was not because they were placed in the seawater, but because they had been swimming. Yes, this room was not small. When the seawater flowed, if the fish did not want to commit suicide and was directly hit by the current, it would need to swim continuously. But even so, the fish would be tired to death if they kept swimming like this. According to what Edward Anderson said when they were assembling it, the fish could only survive for a few days. This water silo can only allow the fish to live for one more day. Fortunately, the place where Zhang Hai sold the fish was not far away. After Zhang Hai and the others finished dealing with the fish, Marlon Rupert's voice came from the communication cabin. The second wave of fish had entered the range. Following Marlon Rupert's words, Zhang Hai and the others threw the fishing net into the sea again. After the previous incident, Zhang Hai and the others were much more relaxed this time. Sure enough, when the net came, it was another bumper harvest. They also got 5 tons of fish, but compared to the previous time, 95% of them were American redfish. It was undeniable that the fish resources on Zhang Hai's side were really rich. The most eye-catching fish in the net is the dozen or so dragonfish. This kind of fish is actually a type of grouper. It is also a type of marine predator fish. Although the size of these fish was not small when they were raised by Zhang Hai, but now they are even bigger. All the fish were more than half a meter long. Zhang Hai grabbed one and tested it. He couldn't help but be surprised. These guys seem to have eaten a lot this year. In a year, they had grown more than 100 catties, which was 50 kilograms. It was really troublesome for ordinary people to catch them. After patting this guy, Zhang Hai threw it into the freezer. The grouper's lineage was there, so it must be very valuable. In addition to the long fan, there were also American redfish, which was thrown into the freezer just now. There were also groupers, which were thrown into the ice. Most importantly, they caught more than 20 salmon. It was obvious that these fishes were gathered together for no good reason. These fishes were hunting fishes, and their food was the fish that they caught in the largest quantity. Translator's note: this chapter was sponsored by Patreon. Grabbing a small silverfish that was not too long, Zhang Hai asked Edward Anderson next to him, "This is a herring, right?" "Well, it's an Atlantic herring. It seems that these little guys were attracted by your fish farm." Looking at the small fish in Zhang Hai's hand, Edward Anderson narrowed his eyes and said with a smile. He was now calculating his income. The 2 waves of fish had a total of about 8 tons. After all, there were different types of meat. If the average price was $8 per kilogram, 8 tons would be 8,000 kilograms, and $8 per kilogram would be $64,000. It seemed that it wouldn't be a problem for him to make more than $100,000 today. Of course, the long fan, grouper, and salmon would not be priced at $8 per kilogram unless there was something wrong with their brains. Okay, deal with it. In addition to the herring, there were barracuda, mackerel, and Spanish mackerel. These fish were not raised by Zhang Hai, but Zhang Hai's place was indeed a treasure. Once these fish came, they did not want to leave. Chapter 673. Fishing is a very tiring activity, at least in Zhang Hai's opinion. After 2 nets of fish, including Zhang Hai, they were already a little tired, but they were still very excited. "Boss, do you know? Canadians don't catch fish as tiring as we do." Picking up a cigarette and putting it in his mouth, Tommy Charles, an old cowboy who has been to many places, couldn't help but say with a smile. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai was really attracted. How do Canadians fish? Looking at him, Zhang Hai also asked as he wished. Zhang Hai knows that Americans and Canadians are born to be quite incompatible. Americans don't like Canadians. The Canadians disliked the Americans even more. It was said that Canada discriminated against the Chinese, but in some areas, they hated the Americans even more than the Chinese. Officially, the 2 countries were united, but in private, the friction between them was not small. Canadians catch fish the same way we do, but they throw the fish directly into the cold storage instead of sorting them out like we do. That way, their workload will be much smaller. But you all know that, so when you buy seafood in Canada, you have to be careful. They might stuff half a basket of seaweed into a basket of fish. Looking at Zhang Hai, Tommy Charles couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, everyone on the boat also laughed. Of course, they all knew that this was nonsense. Because Canada was vast and sparsely populated, they didn't have that many people. Generally speaking, when they fish, they directly put the fish into the freezer, then tidy up the fish nets, and then go to the freezer to sort out the fish. This can be said to have advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that it will speed up the speed of picking fish to prevent the fish from dying after they come out of the water. The disadvantage is that picking fish in the cold storage, it feels particularly cool, especially in this season. In a burst of laughter, the third net of fish was put down. He had to admit that the fishing resources in the Zhonghai fishing ground were really rich. Although these fish had not grown to their maximum size, to be honest, they were not small. At least they could be sold. One net at a time. There was almost no shortage of fish. Almost every time the net went down, at least 5 tons of fish could be caught. Of course, there were all kinds of fish. So Zhang Hai and the others still need to sort. They were busy until noon, and Zhang Hai and the others had already caught 5 nets of fish. A total of more than 20 tons were received, of which the number of American redfish was the largest. Of course, this thing was also the most stocked at the beginning. A total of about 9 tons. This kind of fish is sold on the market for a pound of good fish. Of course, it refers to fish as big as Zhang Hai caught. It is not a problem to sell it for $10 a pound. Even if the cod grows into a monster, it is impossible for it to sell for $10 a pound. Of course, the wholesale price is definitely not that high. It is about $5 a pound, and a kilogram is about $8 to $10. This depends on the price in the market, but Zhang Hai is still very confident. He believes that not only is his fish big, but it should also taste much better than the average American redfish. Even if it is $10 a kilogram, 9 tons is $90,000. There are also 11 tons of other fish, including 1 ton of the anchovies, which is $20 a kilogram, and these fish are worth $20,000. 2 tons of grouper, which is $20 a kilogram, and these are worth $40,000. 3 tons of salmon, which is $30 a kilogram, and these are worth $90,000. There were also more than 2 tons of miscellaneous fish. Even if they weren't very valuable, they were about the same as red fish in the United States. Altogether, the fish were worth about $250,000. Although it wasn't as much as a cow, it wasn't a small sum of money either. All right, boss, it's noon. Let's get some food and rest. Looking at the time, everyone has been busy since 7 o'clock in the morning. It is almost 1 o'clock now. They were too excited about catching fish, so they have already calmed down. Edward Anderson could not help but speak to Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then felt a little hungry. All right, everyone rest. Zhang Hai has never been a boss who does not empathize with his subordinates, because he knows that what Edward Anderson said must be the thoughts of these people. He did not say much and waved his hand, telling everyone to rest and eat. Hearing Zhang Hai say eat, Tommy Charles immediately took out the stove. Then, Edward Anderson and the others did not stay idle. They went to clean up the octopus and squid that Zhang Hai just caught. Although these octopus and squid were the smallest species, even the smallest species. However, even the smallest species had changed after eating his seaweed. Not only had it become bigger, but its meat quality had also become firmer. Edward Anderson had recently become very fond of making teppanyaki squid. This was what he had learned from Little Ya. He would brush it with Mexican chili sauce. It was sweet and spicy, but not too salty. It could perfectly suppress the fishy smell of the squid, but it still tasted very good. While they were cooking, Zhang Hai did not stay idle. He went to slice a few small Spanish mackerels and roasted them. This kind of fish had fewer bones and more meat. Zhang Hai liked this kind of fish very much, but the production of this kind of fish was not small, and the price was not high. Soon, the things that Zhang Hai and the others were almost done. Tommy Charles was still very good at dealing with people. He first got the biggest squid and handed it to Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai did not stand on ceremony and took a big bite after receiving it. He had to admit that Zhang Hai's spiritual energy was really omnipotent. Even if it was just the taste of the squid, it was still quite good.
As soon as the squid tentacles entered his mouth, the gravy instantly filled Jiang Hai's mouth. The fresh taste of the squid, coupled with the taste of the chili sauce, Jiang Hai was not bragging. With this skill, he could directly set up a roadside stall. Eating this delicious grilled squid, Jiang Hai could not help but give everyone a thumbs up. This kind of game was indeed a rare delicacy. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Edward Anderson and the others also laughed. In fact, Edward Anderson and the others had long been tired of eating things in the sea. After all, they had been doing this for half their lives. They really had no interest in the things in the sea. But to be honest, every time they ate the fish in Jiang Hai's manner, it felt really good. At least they were not tired of eating it yet. Naturally, they had to drink beer while eating barbecue. A box of iced Corona was pushed out. Jiang Hai and the others did not stand on ceremony. After opening it, they drank it. The taste of Corona was very refreshing, but to be honest, foreign beer, because of the high alcohol content, was more or less bitter. However, whether it was clear beer or Corona, it had to be accompanied by lemon. After eating a mouthful of lemon and drinking a mouthful of beer, they would feel that the beer was not bitter, but sweet. Then, they ate it with grilled squid and grilled mackerel. The taste was quite good. When going to sea, lemons and the like were naturally indispensable. First, it was to supplement nutrition. Second, lemons could actually happen. Of course, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai for the time being. As the sun set, Jiang Hai stood on the deck, looking at the gradually sinking sun in the distance. He also smiled. This afternoon, they caught 6 more nets. The harvest of each net was actually about the same. After 6 nets, Jiang Hai's fishing boat's cabin was filled to the brim. Not only was the ice storage full, even the ice storage was also full. Although these fish weren't too expensive, these fish alone were worth at least 500,000 yuan. This referred to the price of selling at the fishing port. If Jiang Hai had a retail channel, the price would be even higher. Jiang Hai's people did not say that they would stop after fishing once. There were many schools of fish in this area. According to Edward Anderson, they could fish every other day, and the harvest would be the same every time. They could fish until winter came in October. Then they would look at the problem of fish in the waters and decide whether to bring them in or not. There were a total of 8 months between now and the beginning of October. According to a rough calculation, there were at least 240 days left, which was half of the time to fish. That was 120 days. Excluding storms and the like, there were still 90 days left. 90 days, $500,000 a day. That meant that Jiang Hai could earn $45 million just from these ordinary fish. According to Edward Anderson, it could only be more, not less, and this was only based on the calculation of the American redfish. After all, there were still precious fish species such as dragonfly, grouper, and salmon. Jiang Hai also remembered that there were many lobsters, king crabs, spotted shrimps, large yellow croakers, and Yangtze swordfish at the bottom of the sea. There was no need to think about the Chinese bahabas. In the next few years, Jiang Hai would not touch them. In addition, he also had a batch of bluefin golden spears. If he sold these things, he would be able to earn a lot. 45 million? Haha, adding a zero to the end was more like it. Although it still could not be compared to the price of beef. After all, beef should have a price tag. As long as ordinary cattle were raised to grade 5A, they could also be sold for the same price. However, these fish were different. No matter how delicious the American redfish was, a kilogram was still about $10. Even if it was extremely delicious, the price would still be the same. After all, the bloodline of the American redfish was still there. Just because the American redfish was better than ordinary bluefin golden spears, it did not mean that one could sell for the same price as bluefin golden spears. There were rules in the market, and the price was set by Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai was satisfied. After all, he only spent $280 million to buy this manor, and these fish could bring him more than $400 million in income in a year. After deducting the taxes, he could earn back his capital in a year. In fact, he had already earned back his capital long ago. After all, he had collected more than $1 billion from the cattle. With income, the mentality of the fishermen had changed. At least, they were a lot more upright. And they could also look forward to Jiang Hai's year-end bonus during this year's Chinese New Year. It would probably be very good.
Boss, we are about to reach Boston. Because Jiang Hai's house did not have a warehouse to store fish, Jiang Hai and the others were preparing to sell the fish they caught today directly at night. There was only one largest and fairest fishing company in the vicinity, Michelson Green's. So after Jiang Hai and the others decided to sell, they had already set off for Boston. Oh, I got it. Looking at the port on the sea level in the distance, Jiang Hai also responded. He couldn't help but stand up and go back to the cabin to put on his equipment. Although he was the boss, he would also help when there was a shortage of manpower. It was said that it would be very tiring to forget the mountain and set sail at the port. Jiang Hai and the others drove for more than an hour before they arrived at the port. After arriving at the port, Jiang Hai found that there were not many fishing boats here. After all, there was not much fish in Boston, and the weather was so cold now. This was really not a good season for fishing. When Jiang Hai's boat came over, many people noticed the fishing boat with the words, Soaring Dragon, painted on it, Hua Xia. Everyone in the vicinity knew that this ship belonged to Jiang Hai. If there was a large amount of fish in the vicinity, then it could only be Jiang Hai's ship. Therefore, they wanted to see how much fish Jiang Hai had. Jiang Hai's ship was a ship that had a lot of fish. As for what kind of thoughts they harbored, no one knew. Whether or not they were preparing to do something sneaky, no one knew. But Jiang Hai was not afraid of them stealing fish, because his fish were not so easy to steal. He might be afraid of coming to a warship, but to an ordinary fishing boat, hee. Jiang Hai could only laugh. Do you think Big Fool and Roger are vegetarians? Hey, let's see who's here. Jiang Hai, it's almost time for your fishing ground to open. Are you here to sell today? After entering the port, Jiang Hai saw Michelson Green, who was collecting fish from a distance. At this time, the old man came over with a smile on his face. Your guess is really accurate. How is the current market? Hearing his words, it wasn't the first time they had dealt with each other. Jiang Hai didn't want to talk nonsense with him. They weren't friends or anything, so he directly asked him. It's on the board. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Michelson Green smiled and pointed to a sign hanging next to him. The price of common fish was written on it. The top one was codfish, Atlantic codfish. This fish is very expensive in China, but it is not worth much in the United States. 1.8 US per kilogram, followed by herring, 1.85 US per kilogram. Then sardines, 1.9 US per kilogram. Mackerel, 3.4 US per kilogram, 2.7 US per kilogram. Mackerel, 3.1 US per kilogram. Redfish 8.6 US per kilogram for more than 40 centimeters, 6.3 US per kilogram between 40 centimeters and 30 centimeters per kilogram. Grouper, tiger spot, 20 US per kilogram, 45 US per kilogram, 20 US per kilogram, 15 US per kilogram, 28 US per kilogram, 3.6 US per kilogram. Albacore tuna, 8.7 US per kilogram. Looking at the price, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. This price is a bit low. Chapter 674. Why is the price so low? Before Jiang Hai could say anything, Edward Anderson couldn't help but walk down the boat and ask Michelson Green. He was very unwilling to accept this price. He originally thought that this boat of fish could be sold for at least $500,000. But if he sold it at this price, it would be at least $50,000 less, which was something he was extremely unwilling to accept. I don't have a choice. Michelson shrugged helplessly when he heard Edward Anderson's words. You're also an old fisherman. It's impossible that you don't know. We didn't set this price. I'm also following the price in New York. This is the price set by those bastards on Wall Street. If you think it's low, then I think it's low too. Looking at Edward Anderson, Michelson Green took out a pack of cigarettes and lit one up. In the United States there was no fixed price. In fact, there was no fixed price in China. But in China, the government would regulate these things, which was much better than in the United States. Whenever the price of something increased, such as some necessities like rice, it would only increase within a certain range. Therefore, those who raised the price were all non-necessities, such as garlic, green onions, coriander, and so on. With these years of supervision, the domestic price growth was still very reliable. This was also the best thing about the country. But in the United States, there was no such regulation. In the United States, all prices were set by those capitalists. It was the big bosses on Wall Street who were in charge of setting the price of vegetables, grains, meat, and even forage. The price was whatever they said. For example, if these guys didn't like the special 5A grade beef, they would say that from today onwards, the price of 5A grade beef would be reduced to $1 per kilogram. Then, the price would really be reduced to $1 per kilogram. Of course, $1 per kilogram could only be bought after one bought it. Even if the price was reduced to this level, the people who had 5A grade beef, such as Shanghai, wouldn't sell it to Xueqi or Europe. It was the Americans who didn't want to eat it. It had nothing to do with them. Of course, they couldn't drop the price so ridiculously. It was possible to raise or lower the price by $1, but it was impossible for the price to drop to $1. Shanghai's manor basically didn't deal with these people, because he didn't sell ordinary beef, his wine was brewed by himself, and his grass didn't need to be imported, so whether these people set the price or not had nothing to do with Shanghai. Shanghai was taking the high-end route, and these people could not restrict him. However, the current price of fish made Shanghai a little depressed. Those damn vampires. Boss, are they for sale? Upon hearing Mickelson Green's words, Edward Anderson hesitated for a moment before asking Shanghai. He knew that since the price was set, it meant that he couldn't persuade Mickelson to give them more money. So now the only choice is to sell or not to sell. Shanghai thought for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. Although he also felt that the price was a little low, he had to sell it. He didn't have a warehouse to store these fish, and most importantly, he hadn't found the next buyer. Thinking of this, Shanghai couldn't help but smack his lips. Even if he sold it, he couldn't wait for it to stink. Sell it! As soon as Shanghai's voice fell, Mickelson Green led his sailors to the ship. Boxes of fish were pushed out in front of the onlookers. Seeing that there were so many fish in Shanghai's fish farm, everyone couldn't help but gasp. They knew that Shanghai raised fish, but they didn't expect there to be so many of them. After pushing the fish out, Mickelson Green took out a small knife, picked up an American red fish, and then cut it open. Blood flowed out of the fish's belly in an instant. Then, he took a closer look. Shanghai knew that he was checking the parasites and what the fish ate. When he found that the fish's stomach was full of grass seeds and other things, and there was no feed at all, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Then, he cut open a few other fish and other kinds of fish. He even sliced the meat of salmon and grouper and ate them raw. Seeing him eating raw, Shanghai couldn't stand it. He didn't eat raw things. However, to him, the sashimi was undoubtedly very delicious. He even smacked his lips after eating it. Hey, to be honest, the quality of the fish here is like this, Mickelson Green said while giving a thumbs up. The fish here are fresh and sweet. To be honest, the taste of the American red fish is not worse than that of the yellowfin tuna. But unfortunately, I only collect fish here. Your fish really can't be sold at a high price here. Mickelson Green sighed helplessly and said with some relief. Fortunately, Shanghai didn't have any connections. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his turn to catch these fish. It's good that you know. You got it. Weigh it. Hearing this guy's words, Shanghai rolled his eyes at him, and then said with a little heartache. He felt that his fish had been sold at a cheap price. Thinking about it, he really felt a little reluctant. Okay. After hearing Shanghai's words, Mickelson Green immediately commanded his men to weigh the fish. After the boxes of fish were weighed, they were sent to their warehouse. Edward Anderson and the others also recorded the weight of these people. Shanghai sat next to the dock with some depression, looking at the sea outside. If his fish were sold at such a cheap price, he would be a little unwilling, but how could he make these fish more valuable? Or should he raise them for another year before selling them? This was truly a troublesome matter. Just as Shanghai was in a daze, his phone suddenly rang. Listening to the ringtone, Shanghai picked it up and glanced at it. He found that the caller was none other than Per Walton, whom he hadn't seen since they parted in New York last time. However, she still called him every now and then. Coupled with the previous incident,
The relationship between the two of them became even closer. He heard that since the last time he forced her to abdicate, Perwalton's position in the Walma Group became more and more unbreakable. But in the past, she should be regarded as a direct descendant of her father. But now she was independent. She did not belong to any faction. As for the company, let her father and her uncle fight for it. It was precisely because of this neutrality that neither her uncle nor her father could touch her. She was very safe. This was like some countries in Europe. They had no ambition and had always been neutral. So even if the sky was broken outside, these countries would not be invaded. She was now a neutral figure in the Walmart Group. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she replaced the people of other forces in Sam's Club. Now Sam's Club was owned by her. Seeing that it was her call, Zhang Hai didn't think much and picked it up directly. "Why are you calling me at this time? Isn't it usually at night? Are you off work now?" Picking up the phone, Zhang Hai smiled and asked Perwalton over there. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Perwalton over there couldn't help laughing. "When I want to get off work, who can control me? Really, but you are right. I haven't gotten off work at this time, and calling you at this time is also because of business." Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Perwalton couldn't help but say with a smile. It could be seen that the conversation between her and Zhang Hai was extremely relaxed. Business. Hearing that it turned out to be because of business, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. "What business can she find me for?" "Well, business. You are going to the New York Beef Show in April, right?" Looking at Zhang Hai, Perwalton said to Zhang Hai, "Yeah. This is not news." Although Zhang Hai's beef is now in short supply, he still wants to make his brand known. If one day, the Walmart Group no longer buys his beef, what will he do? So he can't give the initiative to others. It's best to go out and make a name for himself. So Zhang Hai decided to go to the beef show this year. Anyway, it's not very troublesome. Just a few days. Don't go to New York, go to Texas. Hearing that Zhang Hai is really going to participate, Perwalton said directly to Zhang Hai. "Texas? Texas, huh? There. It's not good." Hearing her words, Zhang Hai said hesitantly, "What's wrong? Texas is the core of the ranching industry in the United States, no, the entire world. They'll be holding the National Beef Cattle Competition in April. If your cattle can win the gold medal in this competition, your reputation will be even greater." Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Perwalton couldn't help but ask with some doubts. In fact, Zhang Hai's reputation is a good thing for her. Apart from her private relationship with Zhang Hai, she is the owner of Zhang Hai's club. If the reputation of Zhang Hai Manor is known, then the brand effect of her monopolizing the beef in Zhang Hai Manor will also be reflected. At that time, she can raise the price, which is what she is most interested in. She is not satisfied with just selling Zhang Hai's beef at 5A grade. She wants to make more money, so she has to make Zhang Hai's name known. But listening to Zhang Hai's words, he doesn't seem to want to go. "To be honest, I don't have a good impression of Texas." When Zhang Hai first came to the United States, he went to Texas. In his impression, the people of Texas are not very hospitable people. The proportion of white people in Texas is probably the highest among all the states in the United States. The people of Texas are quite xenophobic, and maybe because many of them are cowboys, they are very vulgar. They will often curse at other people on the street. If you dare to talk back, they will dare to hit you. Racial feelings are quite strong in this state. In this state, almost 99% of the cowboys are white. There are one or two South Americans and black people, but they are basically gathered in the ranches of black people or Latin Americans. So Zhang Hai really doesn't have a good impression of Texas. The second reason why he doesn't want to go is because of the cattle. To go there for the exhibition, you have to bring the cattle, but how do you get the cattle? Take a car? It's not very safe. Zhang Hai doesn't know how to get there by plane. He feels that it is not very reliable. In this case, how to get there is a big problem. Is that so? Actually, you don't have to worry about the first point. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Perwalton can't help but smile and say. She naturally knows Zhang Hai's temper and what the people of Texas are like, but she naturally has her reasons for letting Zhang Hai go. The National Beef Festival is in San Antonio. This time, the National Beef Competition will be held in San Antonio. You know San Antonio,
the city where the NBA's Spurs are located. This city is not a metropolitan area, and the market is small, but the urban area itself is not small, and the population is quite large. You said that Texans have racial discrimination. I am also very clear about it, but it also depends on the place. The people near Dallas are more serious, like Houston and San Antonio are much better. Houston is a space city, so most of the people are foreigners, and there is no such thing, and the people in San Antonio are famous for their good temper. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Pula Walton explained to him. As for the problem you mentioned about the cattle not being able to get there, I can help you. Our group has a lot of planes. It is not a problem to get one to send your cattle there, and those people are all professionals. Don't worry, they won't make your cattle uncomfortable. Then okay. Hearing Walton's words, Zhang Hai's heart, which was still a little shaken, gradually sank. He really doesn't have any opinions, but at least he knows that Walton will not harm him. Since she said there is no problem, then he also wants to make some reputation, so he decided to go to Texas in April this year. By the way, where are you now? Why is it so noisy? After finishing the business, Walton remembered to ask Zhang Hai. Me, I'm selling fish in Boston. Looking at the people around him, it was really noisy, Zhang Hai said to Walton. Selling fish? Did you get fish in your fishery? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton was stunned on the other side of the phone. Yeah, I've already got fish, and the output is not low. Thinking of the fish in his fishery, Zhang Hai couldn't help but say with a smile. Oh my God, you didn't even tell me that your fish are mine. I'll go there tomorrow. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton couldn't help but shout loudly on the other side of the phone. Those fish, she knows, are treasures. Chapter 675. You're here. Looking at the sports car driving into his manor, Zhang Hai couldn't help but walk out of the villa and say to the person in the sports car with a smile. Are you renovating your place? After parking the car in the newly repaired parking lot, Walton got out of the car and looked at the road that was still under construction in the distance. She couldn't help but ask strangely. Now the parking lot was almost finished, and cars could be parked here. At present, the construction team was extending the road outward. Materials and other things were pushed everywhere, and it looked a little dilapidated. Yeah, otherwise, it would be too troublesome to clear the snow in winter, so I added a cover. Hearing Walton's words, Zhang Hai also said with a smile. At this time, the door of the front passenger seat opened, and a person who surprised Zhang Hai came out from inside. This person was none other than Cheryl Lee, the woman who once had some unclear relationship with Zhang Hai and Walton. When Walton was in trouble, she came to inform him. Otherwise, Zhang Hai wouldn't know. At this time, the two people came out together. After seeing Zhang Hai, he also smiled and waved at Zhang Hai. Walton had always been in a hurry. After talking to Zhang Hai yesterday, Zhang Hai knew that she would come over very early today, so he deliberately didn't go out or fish. But to be honest, Zhang Hai really didn't want to sell the fish. It was really too cheap. Originally, he thought that yesterday's fish could be sold for $500,000, but in the end, it only sold for $430,000. He lost $70,000 of fish, but it wasn't cheap. Originally, Zhang Hai's fish was much more delicious than ordinary fish. If he sold it at the price of ordinary fish, it was indeed a loss. Come in. After greeting the two, Zhang Hai walked into the villa, followed by Walton and Cheryl Lee. As soon as they entered the house, they were surprised to find that none of Zhang Hai's women were at home. Where are your girls? Don't say that you are now alone. They finally can't stand you? After looking back and forth and confirming that there was no one else in the villa, Walton couldn't help but say with a smile. Isn't it time to pluck seeds? They all went to the greenhouse. Now the only person in the house who is free is me. Shrugging his shoulders, Zhang Hai said to Walton. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton's eyes couldn't help but light up. Since there's no one else, that's good. Hearing that she was the only one in Zhang Hai's house, Walton couldn't help but smile and walk to him. In an instant, she took off her coat and threw it aside. Then, under Zhang Hai's gaze, she took off the tight shirt under her coat, revealing the purple-red vest inside. Hey, no way, it's still daytime. Looking at Walton's movements, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. He knew how terrifying this woman was when she went crazy. When they were in the hotel, they didn't go out for several days. Don't talk nonsense, you have so many girls to use every day. I don't have a man. Now that we meet, why don't you satisfy me? Pushing Zhang Hai to sit on the sofa, Perwalton sat directly in front of Zhang Hai. Under Zhang Hai's gaze, she directly untied her vest. Looking at the indescribable things that popped out in front of him, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Really? Two hands instantly stroked the two indescribable things that popped out. Zhang Hai asked tentatively. Of course. Hurry up, don't let me wait, they miss you very much. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Perwalton couldn't help but smile and nod. Then she picked up her hands, pressed Zhang Hai's hands, and pinched the indescribable things into different shapes. She also lowered her head and kissed Zhang Hai's mouth. As their tongues chased each other, the atmosphere in the room also changed. Good, the two lips separated. Perwalton smiled with her blurred eyes, then stood up, took off the armor on her lower body, and began to disarm Zhang Hai. Before Zhang Hai could do anything else, Cheryl Lee also came over. Her hands immediately cupped Zhang Hai's cheeks, and then her lips began to repeat Perwalton's movements. In fact, she also wanted to, but there were some things that she couldn't say. After all, she and Perwalton were Perwalton's priority. Recently, she found that Perwalton's attitude towards men and women had changed a little, although she still hated men. But she had a lot of opinions about Zhang Hai. Even in their conversations, they often talked about Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai's beef, Zhang Hai's home, Zhang Hai's character, and Zhang Hai's things. Women, just like men gathered together to talk about women, women gathered together to talk about men. Perwalton especially liked to talk about Zhang Hai. But she knew that it was impossible for her and Zhang Hai to be together. Zhang Hai was unlikely to be with her. But this didn't prevent her from liking Zhang Hai. Even since the last time she came back from New York, the things between them had become less and less, and she wasn't as active as before. But today, she seemed to have seen her former self. Not to mention Perwalton, in fact, Cheryl Lee already missed Zhang Hai very much. The last time she came, she wanted to sleep with Zhang Hai. First, it was to repay Zhang Hai's kindness for helping Perwalton. Second, it was also for her own desire. But at that time, Zhang Hai was drained by Perwalton. In a situation where she wanted to do it, but she was powerless, nothing happened between them. Now that she saw such an opportunity, she wouldn't let it go. She immediately took the initiative, and Zhang Hai felt the initiative of the two. His nerves, which were still persevering, also relaxed. For some things, once it happened once, there would be a second time, a third time, a fourth time. He, Cheryl Lee, and Perwalton had done it more than 3 or 4 times. Naturally, he was familiar with it. As the two slowly slid down and argued, Zhang Hai was also prepared. Looking at the giant beast in front of him, Perwalton licked the saliva from the corner of his mouth, and then sat on it with satisfaction. The war was about to start. Did you sell the fish yesterday? Half an hour later, Perwalton was defeated. He weakly gave up his seat and leaned in Zhang Hai's arms. Cheryl Lee took over. After resting for more than 10 minutes, Perwalton rubbed Cheryl Lee's upper body and said to Zhang Hai, "Yeah, I sold it for 430,000. While feeling Cheryl Lee, Zhang Hai said to Perwalton. At the same time, his hand wrapped around her neck and kept rubbing her upper body. This feeling was really comfortable. You're really a spendthrift. According to Hua Xia's saying, you're recklessly wasting natural resources. Do you know that? Those fish of yours, I can sell them for at least $1 million. Perwalton glanced at Zhang Hai. She didn't care much about Zhang Hai's private life, but Zhang Hai was wasting money like this. She had to say something. She was a businesswoman. Money was very important to her. You didn't say you wanted it. Hiss, I can't. Zhang Hai patted Perwalton's upper body, causing some indescribable things to sway constantly. While satisfying the visual stimulation, Zhang Hai also felt the changes in Cheryl. Feeling Zhang Hai's movements, Cheryl also leaned on Zhang Hai's body and said weakly, I can't do it either. Hearing this, Zhang Hai carried Cheryl Lee and put her on the sofa. What happened next was needless to say. With Zhang Hai's thrusts, 5 minutes later, as Zhang Hai's body arched,
Cheryl also unconsciously opened her mouth wide, but she didn't cry out. After the irritation in his body subsided, Jiang Hai hugged her and lay down on the sofa again. His head rested on Walton's thigh. The three of them were panting loudly. "Since I'm here this time, do you have time in the afternoon? I'll go see if your fish farm is rich or not. I'll see how much I can order then. Also, prepare some fish for me. I want to go back and test it." Walton touched the sweat on Jiang Hai's forehead and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai naturally nodded. This was what he should do. At this time, Cheryl also got up and lay down again. She cleaned up the dirty things she made. Then, the three of them went to take a bath together. Cheryl and Walton also specially brushed their teeth. After everything was done, it was already noon. The three of them got dressed and had lunch first. Then, Jiang Hai called Edward Anderson and told him to prepare the boat to go out to sea. Because this time it was an inspection, Jiang Hai didn't drive a small boat. Although they didn't have many people, they still drove a big boat because only a big boat would have positioning sonar. After boarding the boat, Walton stayed in the steering room. Sam's Club mainly sold high-quality ingredients, so she had some understanding of these things. For example, during the New York Beef Show, her vision was very sharp. Although she wasn't the most professional expert, at least she knew everything about beef and fish. She knew more than Jiang Hai. She stared at the sonar to see the situation of the fish in Jiang Hai's manner. Feelings were feelings. Business was business. Walton did this, and Jiang Hai also wanted her to do this. This way he could live more freely. While she was looking at the fish, Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee ran to the deck and sat directly on the bow. They chatted while blowing the sea breeze. It seemed that since she came to ask for help last time, their relationship had become much closer. "I heard that you went home a while ago. Did you just come back?" Cheryl Lee touched the iron railing in front of her and said to Jiang Hai, "I've been back for half a month. I don't remember the details, but I've been back for a while." After thinking about it, Jiang Hai came back in early March, and now it's almost late March. So, home. It's a good word, but where is my home? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but support her sharp chin, looked at the sea in the distance, and muttered to herself, "Your home? If it's not Walton, then it's South Korea. It depends on what you think. If you want, my place can also be your home." Hearing Cheryl Lee's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, "TCH, you have so many women around you. Aren't you afraid of being squeezed into scum?" Cheryl Lee said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "It doesn't matter. I've provoked so many women. In fact, in most people's eyes, I'm probably scum. After thinking about it, it seems that I really have too many women. It's really not good to do this. You still know. However, although you are a scumbag, you are not a bad scumbag. At least in my opinion, you are indeed not bad. You can create a sense of home for the people around you, although your love can't only be for one person." Cheryl Lee gently leaned her head on Jiang Hai's shoulder. If Jiang Hai didn't have so many messy things to do, maybe he would really be a good home. But is it really good for people like me to talk about home? With a self-deprecating smile, Cheryl Lee felt that it's not bad to be Jiang Hai's lover. If I'm too greedy, then who knows if my beautiful life will continue. Actually, if you want to go back to China, you should go. After all, you are a very important person to Walton. If you always have a psychological problem, it won't be good for you and her. Moreover, I also care about you, don't I? Looking at Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but tilt her head and smile gently. Yes, there are still people who care about me. Jiang, I have to admit that I really didn't expect your fishing resources to be so rich in this morning. But at this moment, Walton walked out of the cabin, then looked at Jiang Hai with a look of contempt. He sat down beside Jiang Hai and said to him, "Is it okay? I'm a genius in the aquaculture industry." Hearing Walton's words, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "The fish here, whether it's the species or the population, are quite good. Now we have to see how the quality of the meat is. If your meat quality is good, I think I can help you spread the name of your Manners fish." Looking at Jiang Hai, Walton said to him mysteriously,
Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her doubtfully. Her idea? What is it? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.